Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting tonight on July 6, 2026 at 6 p.m. We'll start the meeting with a roll call.
Brummel.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Klatt.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Riddle.
Here.
Router.
Here.
Roderick.
Here.
We have a quorum. We now will be continuing our public hearing from where we left off on June 15th. As stated in our last meeting, one of the duties of the Plan Commission is to conduct a public hearing in order to listen to and record the testimony of the public whenever the city considers requests including a zoning map amendment, otherwise known as rezoning, approval of a special use, and variance requests. For everyone in this room, so we understand exactly how this process works, the citizens on the Planning and Zoning Board, which are the individuals located to my right, are appointed positions. We are not elected officials. We're appointed recommendation board that conducts the public hearings for the City of Plano. Once we've conducted the public hearings on this subject, we will then make a recommendation to the Plano City Council, which is comprised of elected aldermen and the mayor. They will have the final vote for or against the petitioner's request regarding this public hearing matter. Each interested party who plans to speak tonight during the public hearing, whether you wish to testify or ask a question, present a witness, or cross-examine any witnesses, must register first on the public hearing interested party registration sheet, which was located on a table outside of the auditorium. Interested parties are defined as all owners within 250 feet in each direction of the location in which the property is located and who have received a certified letter about the hearing tonight. Also, interested parties may include any taxing body or units of local government, including school districts, in which the subject property is located. If you wish to speak tonight and have not registered yet, please do so while I continue reading through the procedures of tonight. Marty is located in the back there, so if anyone needs to sign up, he is located right by the door. Additionally, the last half an hour of each scheduled meeting session has been set aside for comments by the general public. This is up to 3 minutes per speaker. This part of the evening will be open to anyone who wishes to approach the podium and speak to the commission. We have guidelines and procedures. In place for the public comment section of our evening as well, and I'll read through those closer to the time that we begin that part of the night. We encourage you also to sign up for the public comment portion of the night on the sign-up sheet, also located with Marty, if you wish to speak during that time, and we will call for comments in order of how you signed up. This is the order of how we will follow through this public hearing process. The petitioner, Plano Skies, will provide an opening overview of their proposal tonight, after which they will present their proposal in detail, describing it through various witnesses and experts' written items and reports that they've brought. After each presentation by the petitioner, Plano Skies, or their experts, the commission members sitting to my right may then ask questions to the petitioner, the city staff, and consultants with regard to this project. Cross-examination of Plano Skies and its witnesses may also then be conducted by the interested persons who have signed up on the interested party registration list. Upon completion of the petitioner's full proposal, the commission will then hear testimony of the interested parties, both for and against the petition. They will be able to come up and speak based on those on the interested party registration sheet. Following a testimony by interested parties, the petitioner, Plano Skies, and the commission may ask questions of those interested parties who testified. Upon completion of the evidence by interested parties, the petitioner may provide a rebuttal to any testimony in opposition, subject again to cross-examination by the interested parties. When there's no further testimony, and we've made it through all of these meetings, the hearing will then be closed, and the commission, later during this meeting or a future meeting, will then take its vote and make its recommendation in writing for the City Council. If the issue is not voted on tonight, we will be making a motion to continue this public hearing, much like how we have in the previous meetings. In order to speak during the hearing as an interested party, I ask that your name, address, and signature must appear on the interested party registration sheet. By signing that registration sheet, you understand and agree that your statements will be considered a sworn testimony and that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Therefore, there will be no need to swear in each person individually. Please be concise in your testimony. If your point has already been made during the hearing, it's not necessary to repeat it, and each item addressed and each point made is recorded and considered by the commission up here to make its final findings and recommendation. We encourage anyone to please be welcome and feel that you can approach the podium and speak during that time. When it is your turn to testify, please approach the front of the aisle, either microphone, and speak directly into the microphone so that you may be heard. Again, state your name, spelling your last name for the reporter, and indicate if you are representing an entity, give your address. If you speak after your initial testimony, please give your name each time for the record. At the conclusion of the testimony tonight, the commissioners will be asked whether they have heard adequate testimony in order to make a decision. If they have, the public hearing would then be closed, and we as a commission would move forward to action to move on to City Council. Once the public hearing is closed, the city staff and consultants will offer their comments based on the testimony presented at the hearings and consider the comments of other entities such as local government, and then the commission shall then proceed to vote on the items of the petitioner of Plano Skies. This is the only public hearing for this evening on the agenda, which addresses petitions for rezoning of properties currently in Plano, annexation, and rezoning of properties outside of Plano, special use permitting for ground-mounted solar farm energy systems, and variance to our current city codes. With that being said, my goal as chair is always to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to feel heard. And I ask respectfully that all parties respect the commission members sitting up here to my right and guidelines that we've put in place tonight for this public hearing. We will not tolerate any disrespectful behavior, and you will be asked to leave if necessary. I really hope that we don't have to do that, but with that being said, I just need a motion to reopen the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Cliff Olson to reopen the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Rauter. Roll call vote.
Olson,
Yes.
Router,
Yes.
Brummel,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Klatt,
Yes.
Riddle,
Yes.
Roderick.
Yes.
Motion carries, and public hearing is now open. I did want to make a note before we start our presentation from our petitioner that the microphone is also available to those who cannot make it to the front of the stage. If you need us to move the microphone around, please let us know. Just come forward and let us know if there's a disability issue or if you need something to help assist you in making public comment. We just want to make sure that everybody feels the opportunity to speak. So please let us know, Marty out in the hallway, if that is an issue for anyone currently. And with that being said, the public hearing is open, and we will now listen to the experts brought tonight from Plano Skies on the subject matter.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again to the City of Plano and to the Plano School District, as well as all of you community members for being here again. My name is Emma Nelson. I am a Director of Permitting and Environmental with this Plano Skies Solar Project. I will be speaking this evening regarding vegetation and screening for the project area, followed by a couple of other experts as well.
Ms. Nelson, you had previously taken an oath on the very first night. You understand that you're still under oath for the purposes of this continued hearing?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to kind of reorient ourselves and a little bit of housekeeping here, I did want to revisit some of the topics, just point them out here that we have had 2 nights of public hearing presentations already. So previously, we have discussed the project background, project overview, as well as environmental and wildlife. We then, at the last meeting, presented on the engineering studies and construction, as well as the site plan review. And then we did have a decommissioning expert at the last meeting as well. If there are questions on those topics, we are still more than happy to address those. But I did want to point out that this evening, our focus will be on vegetation and screening, so I will be presenting that material. I will then be followed by Mike Conaway, who will present the sound study. This is a new addition to our expert panel, just to address some of the questions that were raised at the last meeting. And then lastly, this evening, we do plan to address public health and safety. So we have our public health and safety expert, Dr. Chris Olson, here as well to present tonight. We do have 2 more topics after that. So the property values and economic impact assessments, we do expect to follow for future nights, most likely. For all of the meeting materials, they will be uploaded after the meeting this evening at the QR code as shown here. We are also updating this with the video recordings that the city is providing as well. So the materials from the previous meetings as well as this evening's meeting will be uploaded at the QR code for your viewing. All right, so starting with our vegetation management. So the City of Plano's solar ordinance requires a site-specific vegetation management plan to be prepared for the site. We have provided a preliminary plan as part of our application materials. And so that plan does include a number of items that I will get into a little bit further. But the primary focus there is to make sure that we are providing a drought-tolerant ground cover beneath the solar panels and within any areas that may be disturbed by project activities. The establishment of that vegetation will reduce erosion and control potential runoff from the site. It will also preserve soil on site. Most of this project area is currently cultivated crops. So by maintaining solid vegetation beneath the panels and within the array area, we will seek to improve the soil health and maintain soil stabilization across the site. And then lastly, one other key focus here is that we will be preserving topsoil within the project area. This is not only a requirement of the City of Plano's solar ordinance, it is also a requirement of the Illinois Department of Ag's Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. So that is something that is reiterated again in our vegetation management plan. So our vegetation management plan does include kind of a 2-tiered approach here. So we will have a cover crop that will be installed early on in the process, typically prior to start of construction, and that will be then followed by the installation of a permanent seed mix. So that permanent seed mix has been proposed in accordance with the City of Plano's solar ordinance, and that does include a mixture of both native prairie and pollinator supporting plantings. So the City of Plano's ordinance does require that mix is primarily made up of those either native prairie or pollinator plantings, and that is what is being proposed in our Graminoid Plus seed mix. The planting timings is preferred in either the spring or the fall, but that will be largely dependent upon the construction schedule and the conditions on site at the time. The preferred seed installation method is via drill seeding. However, we may incorporate broadcast seeding as well if needed. All right, so our vegetation management plan does break out the management of the site and the ground cover throughout the life of the project. So we've broken this down into phases. The first phase is typically the establishment period. So during that time frame, it is much more labor intensive in terms of the folks that will be on site. There will be more frequent mowing that is primarily intended to manage any potential weeds within the project area. By weeds, we are referring to both those regulated in the state of Illinois as well as species that may not be compatible with the permanent seed mix. So that will be primarily managed via mowing. Then we will also be conducting on-site monitoring of the vegetation to make sure that that is properly establishing beneath the arrays. During that transition phase, so that's typically in years 3 to 5, we are able to reduce the mowing frequency during that time frame. So that is usually, we're able to maintain some more targeted weed control, and that vegetation is becoming more self-sufficient and well-established across the site. The long-term maintenance, that's typically years 6 through 35, so throughout the majority of the life of the project, we will have mowing on an annual or biannual basis, and then that will be, there will be the control of invasive species as well during that time frame, either through mowing or as needed through herbicide application. So we'll be working to maintain the vegetation height so as not to interfere with solar panel production, but also maintain that pollinator supporting mix within the array area. So the primary tools throughout the majority of the life of the project, mowing will be the primary method, and then we may incorporate herbicide use as needed as well. All right. So moving on to our landscape screening plan. So the vegetation management plan is focused on areas within the array area, so within the project fence line, and areas disturbed immediately outside the project fence. We also are proposing a landscape screening plan, which is required by the City of Plano's solar ordinance. The city ordinance requires a very specific screening, which does include a screening berm that averages at 5 feet in height. And then on top of the screening berm, the ordinance further requires the installation of landscape materials. So that breakdown is shown up here on the screen, but every 50 linear feet, that would incorporate 1 shade tree, 1 evergreen, 3 deciduous shrubs, and 3 evergreen shrubs. The ordinance provides means for modifications to that landscape material composition. So we can replace that shade tree with 3 ornamental trees, and we can also incorporate ornamental grass to reduce the number of deciduous shrubs required. So that is something that is reflected in our proposed plan. The intent of landscape screening is to preserve the aesthetics of the area. So visual mitigation does not entirely hide the project from view, but rather it provides visual buffers that allow the project to integrate into the existing landscape. All right, so it was mentioned at the beginning, as part of our application request, we did include variance requests associated with the current city code. So as I mentioned, the city ordinance does require very specific landscape screening to be installed. The first screening type, again, this is 2 separate variance requests. The first variance request pertains to the berm that is installed around the entire perimeter. The way the ordinance is written, it states that the surrounding of the perimeter of the solar farm energy system shall be installed with a berm. We are proposing that a berm be installed in select locations. So berm installation poses a lot of challenges for a project. This would be approximately 350,000 cubic yards of fill that would be required to screen the entire perimeter of the project. That would be up to 44,000 truckloads of soil that would be required to be brought into the site. So again, we are preserving the topsoil and the existing soil within the project area, so we would need to bring in all of the fill material required to construct a berm. Additionally, a berm has the potential to substantially change or modify the drainage both within the project area and on the properties adjacent to the site. It also poses the potential future decommissioning challenges. So the intent of the project, and as you heard at the last meeting or may have seen, The intent is for the project to be decommissioned at the end of its useful life and to return to agricultural use. A berm would pose a lot of potential challenges to that plan. The second variance request I would like to discuss this evening pertains to the landscape screening materials. I mentioned this on the last slide as well. So the landscape screening materials are very specific in terms of the composition and frequency that is proposed. We are asking that the city consider the installation of screening materials in select locations only, and that it also be proposed to be installed at grade. So we will get into this a bit further with some visual simulations, but vegetative screening at grade provides sufficient screening in most locations. Additionally, vegetative screening is not necessary around the entire perimeter. So there are areas where there is existing vegetation, existing topography, or sufficient project setbacks that provide sufficient visual mitigation as it is proposed. So again, the landscape screening and the installation and the operational challenges for a screening around the entire perimeter is something that would be a much more intensive use than solar alone. So again, these are the two variance requests that we are asking the city to consider this evening. All right, so what I am showing here is a proposed landscape screening plan. I do want to take a moment. I know that we have all discussed the project location and the project site plan a couple of times already, but just kind of want to reorient ourselves in terms of what we are looking at here. So the map that I am sharing shows the project area. The project perimeter is outlined in yellow. The areas with the darker gray hatching are the proposed panel locations. This map also incorporates proposed screening locations. I might pause to note that this screening map differs from what was included in the original application as submitted. This is due to the refinement of the project's site plan, as well as our continued community outreach here. So what we are proposing on this screening plan includes a couple of different types of screening. So those that are shown in purple are locations where we are proposing a berm with vegetative screening installed on top. The areas in pink, we are proposing vegetative screening that is in accordance with the ordinance screening composition requirements. However, we ask that it be installed at grade, so on the bare earth, not on top of a berm. There are a couple of areas where we have an alternative screening type proposed. So those are shown in teal. The alternative screening type I will get into in a little bit more detail later as well, but the intent there is to provide some screening and some visual mitigation for our participating properties, but at maybe a lesser density than what is provided in the primary screening type. So the things that we considered as we looked at the screening locations and as we prepared this plan, again, we looked at the existing vegetation and topography. So there are some areas where there is sufficient vegetation immediately adjacent to the project to provide ample screening. Additionally, we looked at the project infrastructure and our proximity to other residences. And then we also looked at the established local travel corridors. So as you can see, the project area is bordered by Rock Creek and Little Rock roads. So those are areas that we did consider as well. All right, taking a little bit closer look here. So I did want to, again, zoom in a little bit to give you guys a better look at kind of what we were proposing and why. So we did focus the areas with a berm and vegetative screening in areas where we are screening non-participating properties that are adjacent or in close proximity to the project area. We then included the standard screening type along those established local travel corridors. so to provide some aesthetic benefits as you travel into and out of the community. This teal area is that alternative vegetative screening type that I mentioned previously as well. All right, the southern portion of the project, this area includes the above screening types as well. Here we focused again on the local travel corridors, as well as our participating properties within the project area. You can see that there are areas, say to the west of the project, where the existing vegetation and forest provide sufficient screening such that additional vegetative screening and plantings is not necessary. Another key benefit here is that we are not removing any of the existing trees, so the existing hedgerows or existing vegetation will remain in place. So we are enhancing the trees around the site in what we are proposing to add, and we are not removing any of the existing trees around the project area. Now, in total, this area is approximately 17,700 linear feet of screening that we are proposing. That is over 3 miles of linear feet of screening that is being proposed. I will say that is more than what we have provided at any other of our existing projects. The landscape screening plan. So this gives you a little bit better idea of what that screening composition would include. So this is from the proposed plan itself. This is a profile view as well as kind of an overhead plan of what a typical planting would incorporate. This is the primary screening type. So this is the screening type that was shown in pink on the proposed map. This incorporates the deciduous shrubs, evergreen shrubs, ornamental trees, and evergreens that are required based on the city code. We have also shown a buffer, so it's shown here as kind of a strip with dots. That is an area where we are proposing the incorporation of a pollinator seed mix. In this area where we are outside of the solar arrays, we are able to incorporate taller pollinator species. So we are using grasses and forbs that can grow anywhere from 2 up to 7 feet. So those will be mixed in with the trees and shrubs that are proposed here. All right, the alternative screening type is shown here. This is what we are showing as a potential option in areas for participating properties, but could be used elsewhere as well. This is very similar to what is proposed in the primary screening type, which is in compliance with the city ordinance. This screening, the alternative screening option, incorporates the mixture of evergreens and deciduous species, as well as an incorporation of that pollinator-friendly mix for the plantings of grass beneath the plantings of the trees and shrubs. But this is much less dense and provides sufficient coverage as well. This is consistent with what we have installed on other projects in the Midwest. Okay, I wanted to also provide a look at what a berm might require. So this profile view shows what the berm construction would entail. So, while I mentioned we would be required to bring in up to 350,000 cubic yards of fill material, that would need to include both impervious materials, so more clay and more dense soils for the foundation, as well as the shell or transition filter, which would be more topsoil that would be conducive to the landscape screening plantings. This would also need to incorporate considerations for drainage. So again, berm construction is a very intensive process, both in terms of the construction process, but also in terms of the engineering requirements that would go into it as well. Okay, so here I've provided a couple of different visual simulations. So this site in particular, or this location in particular, is taken along Rock Creek Road, This is just north of Miller Road, and you are looking north-northwest. So this is at planting. So this shows you the tree heights, the trees and shrubs at planting. This also incorporates the mixture, the pollinator grasses and forbs that we mentioned as well. Those are a little bit harder to see at planting, but that is mixed into what this visual simulation is depicting. This is showing the panels at max tilt, which means that would be a maximum height of 15 feet tall. So that is the tallest they would be. That is the tallest profile you would see as you travel down the road. The most, typically during the day, most of the day they are at a more flat angle as they track the sun. So that height is closer to 5 feet overall. This is that same visual simulation, so the same vantage point. However, this is at maturity, so this is after 10 years. So after all of the species have had a chance to establish on site. As you can see, the visual mitigation is not a solid screen, but it does help to improve the aesthetics along the project perimeter. All right, this is another visual simulation. This vantage point is shown from the Stainfield neighborhood west of the project area. So this is from that neighborhood looking to the east. As you can see, this location does not propose any screening. The panels are sited a quarter mile away from any residential properties at this location. So as you can see, there are panels that are visible along the view line, along the horizon there. However, this is again at max tilt at a maximum of 15 feet tall. So this is an area where we felt that visual mitigation was not necessary due to the sufficient project setbacks. All right, so lastly, again, we are requesting 2 variances in association with the proposed landscape screening. So we are asking that the berm installation be incorporated in select areas. This would significantly reduce the need to bring in additional soil and significantly reduce the construction impacts associated with that effort. It would also minimize the potential for potential drainage concerns. The landscape screening modification and the location, again, we are still proposing over 3 miles of vegetative screening. However, we ask that we be allowed to install that screening at grade. We also ask that we be allowed to focus that in areas where it best benefits the project neighbors and the project community. So incorporating landscape screening around the entire perimeter of the project would be a much more intensive use and something that would require excessive construction activity as well as maintenance during the operational phase of the project. So we would ask that we mitigate for visual impacts in areas only where necessary and not in areas where the existing vegetation and setbacks allow for sufficient coverage. Okay, and that concludes my portion of the presentation this evening. So I appreciate the consideration and I'm available for questions.
So at this time, we'll let commission members ask questions on this particular presentation. Once commission members are done asking questions, we'll open it to interested parties who then will be able to ask questions solely on landscape screening and variance requests to the berm and vegetation. So that's kind of how the order is going to go. So commission members, any questions? We can start off.
So that you're in the north of Miller looking northwest. Those trees you're...
So in the visual, I believe you're referring to the visual simulation. Okay, yes, so those are the trees at planting, so the ordinance does have specific requirements in terms of the planting heights, and so that is shown at planting.
So I was part of the commission who wrote this ordinance in the best interest of Plano as far as beautification goes. So my question for you is, why did you pick and choose certain roads to dismantle our ordinance, such as why Galena, what was the thinking behind why some roads required vegetation and others didn't when they do kind of, I'm just curious.
So we focused on the local travel corridors, so areas that have the most amount of traffic. So for example, Rock Creek and Little Rock Road are areas that are immediately north of the existing city limits, where we wanted to provide ample screening. Miller Road, for example, is a less traveled road that goes through the project area where we did not feel like screening was necessary in those areas.
Also along the same lines, why other than hardship to build, why no berms on that particular 3 miles? I mean, what was the thinking behind that? I understand the amount of hardship for bringing the dirt in, but the berms were actually in place because of beautification purposes for the long-term 30-year effect of the visual and coping with the changes visually. So other than, I understand the hardship financially and the truckloads and also the decommissioning issues, but why else the reasoning behind that?
So that is something we considered and something that we had modeled previously as well. And when you look at the installation of a berm, it provides minimal additional coverage in those first few years of establishment for the landscape screening. So that is, I think, the primary reason is that the benefit felt relatively low in comparison to the amount of traffic and the hardship imposed by that.
Within that same point, with the visual simulations, do you have a timestamp on that? The two, you had the first year of growth being lower, and then what was the age on the visual simulation on Rock Creek Road looking northwest?
That's at year 10.
Okay.
So that is when the species that are shown there would be considered at maturity.
Which berms were in place really to buffer for those first 10 years so the vegetation was grown, was kind of the thinking behind that. Because trees do take a while to fill in. Also why the landscaping is so dense, limiting that. Also just what was the thinking behind thinning the vegetation screening out on your guys' side?
So that was proposed in select areas, that alternative screening type. And in those locations where it has been proposed, there is minimal impact in terms of the community. So it's impacting fewer individuals than what you might see along a local travel corridor. So that is where that alternative screening type is proposed. The primary screening type that is shown throughout the majority of the screening plan is in compliance with the landscape screening composition requirements in terms of the number of plants and the types of plants incorporated.
So
sorry.
why isn't there the screening along Galena Road?
So as we looked at the different corridors, we did focus on the areas that enter directly into the current city limits. So that was our primary focus. We do have a single area of screening along Galena Road that provides screening for a residential structure adjacent to the roadway in that location.
Do you have berms currently on any of your other projects?
We do not.
You said the screening met the requirement, the vegetative screening met the requirement, but that would be on a berm, and you're talking about ground level.
Right. So the composition of the screening meets the requirements. So in terms of the number of trees and shrubs proposed and the types of trees and shrubs proposed, those are in line with what is included in the City of Plano's solar ordinance.
Correct, but in the ordinance, they're on top of a berm.
Right, so we
In
are,
this case, you're asking for a ground level,
correct.
so that diminishes the screening greatly, and at least for 10 years?
So the screening, the berm is required to be approximately 5 feet tall. So that is relatively minimal in terms of the overall height of the trees anticipated. So it really provides minimal additional coverage when you compare screening with or without a berm.
And just for clarification, because Mr. Riddle brought up a good point. You had a slide that said primary screening and a slide that said alternative screening.
Correct.
What was the difference between those two?
Okay, so the primary screening is what is the composition. So when I say composition, I mean the plant materials themselves.
Okay.
So that the plant materials and the primary screening are in accordance with the City of Plano's planting requirements.
Okay.
The alternative screening type is what we are proposing in select areas that are screening participating residential properties.
So for clarification, reduce of berm and reduce of landscape,
Yes.
two separate.
Yes.
That said, I noticed that the reduction of the berm, which the ordinance requires full perimeter berm, looks like it's reduced to nearly nothing, based on your map.
We substantially reduced the footprint of the proposed berm.
So just for clarification, the height of the berm that you're proposing is roughly 5 feet, or that the city requires is roughly 5 feet, okay? That's the planting, okay? The purpose of the berm is to get the plantings high enough that nobody has to look at this. Are we clear on that? Okay.
Yes.
So now that being said, now if we remove the dirt below it, now we're going to see it above the 5-foot planting. Do you see the issue? Okay. So another question I have is seed types and native plantings. We've talked about seed types and native plantings a couple different times. Can you give me the exact specific types of plants, what their heights are?
I do have those. They're also in the screening plan. So if you're referring to either the vegetation management plan or the screening itself, I can provide either or both of those. These are preliminary seed mixes and preliminary proposed plantings in terms of the landscape screening as well. So those will be largely dependent upon availability at the time of construction. So when we determine the final vegetation management plan and the final landscape screening plan at the time of building permit application, at that point we will be identifying contractors and looking at seed and plant availability. So these will be finalized at a later date, but what we are proposing is very consistent with what we are installing across our current projects.
So when looking at the landscape screening plan of the entire project, you have vegetative screening on Galena, but only on certain parts, and then you have Rock Creek, but you eliminated certain parts just based on visual from the road. I'm just trying to,
Along Rock
if
Creek,
we're protecting our corridors, why pick and choose certain areas on that corridor that you find more priority than others? Just trying to figure out the reasoning, especially Galena, because we have vegetation up there.
along Rock Creek specifically, That is screened entirely except for the portion of the road where it extends out and away from the project perimeter. So there are increased setbacks there. There's also existing vegetation in that buffer between the roadway and the project area. Similarly, along Little Rock, we did screen both sides. And then along Galena, again, we focused mostly on the primary entrances and exits from the city.
Yeah, and I'd like to add as well, just on Galena, you can kind of see the fence line goes parallel with the road. However, you can see that the panels actually back away from the road as it goes as well. So that's part of the consideration, is the setback from the actual physical panels, maybe not as much as the fence.
You also seem to have vegetation screening around certain homes but not others. Any particular reasoning?
Yeah, we've had conversations with neighboring landowners and things like that. I think some of the primary concerns, at least with the participating landowners, have been, being truly more surrounded by panels and really wanting to take care of them, as well as being closer to the substation rather than being, near panels on one side of the house or something like that. These were ones that we really wanted to put some effort into making sure they have some mitigation of visual effects.
I really appreciate the simulations that you guys have. Do you have any actual pictures of some of the screening that you've done at other places?
We do. I do not have those available right now, but we do.
We can provide those at the next meeting. We can
we
bring
can.
those.
And back to the mowing and the maintenance of it. I'm assuming this would also be maintained as well as along with the mowing.
So within the array area, so the way that the ordinance is written, within the array area, so beneath the panels and in the areas of the panels, the ordinance requires that the vegetation be maintained so as not to interfere with panel function. So the planting mix that is selected here and is proposed will not interfere. So the maximum toe clearance, so at maximum tilt, the clearance between the bottom of the panel and the ground is expected to be a little over, like 27 inches is what is anticipated. So the maximum height that's proposed in the mix is typically around 24. So we really minimize the mowing within the project to the extent possible. Outside the project fence line, so outside of the immediate array areas, but within the limits of disturbance where we would be responsible for long-term maintenance, those areas will be mowed to 8 inches in accordance with the city ordinance.
And it would be 8 inches under the panels?
No, underneath the panels, it could be taller. And the intent there is to really support the vegetation establishment and the health of that vegetation beneath the array areas. The ordinance does ask that we provide native prairie and pollinator supporting plants, and so by allowing those to grow, we support that further.
Hypothetically, if there was to be, we're in summer at like maximum thermal energy, maximum potential of the heat coming off of this, and there was, let's say, up to 36 inches of grass, and it is a drought. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Obviously, in your history of building these, have you seen fire, and how is that controlled in a situation like that when you're dealing with 36 inches on top of like a drought?
So those areas will be mowed at least annually or biannually, depending on the growing season. So we will include mowing as part of our operations. So it's very unlikely that it would reach that height. It is also very unlikely that we would have a fire. So if there were, though, it's been shown that it doesn't affect the panels themselves. Oftentimes it'll go straight through the project area even. This is not something we've experienced specifically, but has been observed in other areas. And actually, I think our public health and safety expert touches on this a bit later too. Okay. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to add as well, just around the safety of fires, that the ultimate priority is safety of the surrounding area and not the project in these scenarios. So if something were to happen within the project, the priority is preserving houses nearby, residents nearby, making sure everybody gets out safely. And, you know, whatever we need to do to maintain and keep it within the project footprint, we will do with the emergency response plan.
Finally, in line with that, if there was, again, I'm always thinking 5, 10, 15 years. 15 years from now, mowing isn't being done, it's changed hands. Who is the point of contact if we're fully up and running 15 years down the road, 3 people working there? Who are we contacting in case, as a city? Who's our contact for maintenance and control? And then how do we have any recourse if things are not being maintained to our liking or ordinance?
Yeah, so there will be 2 different contacts, one during construction, that will be a construction manager specifically for construction-related concerns or complaints. And then similarly, during operations, there will be an asset manager who will be the direct contact. At our other projects, traditionally, that phone number is given out to every single project. It's their personal phone number with their cell phone. And standardly, we keep a complaint log, and within that, we have to keep track of what the complaint was, when it was filed, and how it was handled, and in what time frame it was handled. So we would anticipate maintaining that complaint log so that it's always kept standard. And then, of course, if we were against code, that would be something we would have to remediate before we are able to continue functioning this project.
Can we go back to the berm and plantings just a little bit more? So if the city code is plantings of 5 feet with a berm below it, that would give us at a height of higher than roughly 8 to 10 feet. How could we establish plantings that are taller if we are going to allow or not allow a berm? Could that be something that would be considered so that there's a visual barrier and people are not looking at this?
So if you're asking for plantings to be, for the plantings to be taller at the time of planting, is that the question?
More mature plantings, or even plantings that, even when they're mature, are taller than 5 feet. If we are asking for the city to give up the berm, which is several feet tall, how do we then accommodate for the visual barrier that's now lower?
This is something that we actually have discussed with our landscape architect who assisted with the design of the proposed landscape screening plan. The reality is that if you start with larger trees at planting, they oftentimes, it doesn't mean they're going to reach maturity sooner. So they oftentimes they grow at a much slower rate, and they require more intensive maintenance during that establishment and operations phase. So it just takes longer for them to establish properly.
Well, in my travels, I've seen many of these I consider ugly fields, and I want more screening. Just my thought.
Agreed. I think that the reduction of berms, as I said before, is greatly reduced to nearly nothing in terms of that is our ordinance, is a complete berm around the entire perimeter, as to be understood to be part of the screening. Removing the berm and only using vegetation not only lowers the screening, but it imposes gaps in the screening that the berm wouldn't have. I do understand there's areas where maybe berms aren't necessary. I understand the problems associated with planting on the berm, bigger vegetation. But bigger vegetation would be the ask wherever the berm isn't. So there shouldn't be a problem planting taller vegetation. Like, let's say if you remove a berm from an area, then we're gonna want higher vegetation there. You all sat here and listened to the people. They don't even want it. People here don't want this. So the city came up with a plan. Nobody wants to look at it. The city came up with a plan to say, okay, there's a way around that. We can build a berm. We can do a lot of vegetation. It might be your decision that on a particular road or in a particular area that it's not necessary. That's your thoughts. I don't think those thoughts are shared. So I would think that a better screening plan would definitely be in order here. Thank you.
You referred to berms as being, let's see here, I made a note. Water, issues with the berms. Would you be open if there were, the berms that you do have built, and if there were water issues, to providing culverts to satisfy the water buildup?
Yes, so part of that plan would incorporate drainage as part of the berm design. So it is very likely that we would be installing culverts anywhere we are installing berms as it is. So that is definitely something that would be incorporated.
Yeah, I'd like to add with that, that's part of the concern around berms, particularly with this site-specific field, is that this drainage largely flows in a sheet form from north to south, and that's where, as we've done hydrology studies and drainage studies, that's what we've seen. And part of the concern is when you intercept that sheet flow and even provide drainage through a culvert, you're now redirecting it to a point flow, and it's hard to know exactly what that drainage is going to do based on that. So that's part of our concern, is rather than causing drainage issues and needing to repair them after, all sorts of damage or anything, we instead are hoping to prevent that cause from even happening.
But if there was a berm, you could, in fact,
Yes.
have the culvert system in place
Yes.
to properly drain?
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Is there a fence? There's a fence around the whole thing, right? How tall is that again?
So there's an 8-foot fence that is required by the city code.
Sorry, in the parts where you're proposing to not have a berm and just other vegetative screening, can you make that taller? Could you make it impervious? Could you put wood there? Could you put, like they do when subdivisions next to traffic, so you can't see it at all until the vegetation grows? That would take care of the 10 years.
What we have currently proposed around the majority of the site is a wildlife fence. So what that does is it allows for passage of smaller animals within the project area. So, smaller mammals and reptiles usually will go throughout the site fairly easily. That's actually shown, I believe, in that the visual simulation. It's just really hard to see because it is intended to blend in with the landscape. There are select areas where we are proposing a solid screening fence, and that is as it's required by the city code, where we're adjacent to residentially zoned properties.
It seems to me if you can't see it, it doesn't matter what you use. A fence or a berm or trees, if that's the concern of being able to see it or not, so.
Thank you.
In the areas that, like specifically Galena Road, where you guys chose not to put any berm or vegetative screening, yet you reduced the footprint of the solar farm back quite a ways, and there's some other areas here where there is open space, no solar, no vegetative screening. Obviously, the fence, we just discussed that. But what are you filling with that land in between the solar fencing without the vegetative screening on Galena Road, what's going there? Is that just, yeah, what is going there?
So that area likely will be revegetated if there are larger tracts. So there is an area kind of to the west of the project adjacent to Villman Road. And that area would likely be continued to be farmed. So like some of those areas, if it's a larger tract, will be allowed to, continue to be farmed. But there are, anything that's immediately outside of the project fence line is something that we would be responsible for maintaining throughout the life of the project.
And then is that part of the biannual mowing, or is that more of a consistent mowing, or what's the mowing schedule for the corridor roads?
So those areas where we are not proposing screening, in order to maintain that 8-inch requirement based on the city ordinance, will likely require a more frequent mowing schedule than what is typical within the project fence line.
And also, if that isn't getting done regularly, you're telling me that there's a project manager after the build, after the 15 months?
Correct.
That is managing all of this in a timely manner?
Yes.
A
So
representative from Savion, or?
it would be a representative of the project, yes.
Okay. Local, or just a local person on site for the job, or just someone as a contact?
It can typically depend. We'd like for them to be local. It just depends on, because we'll typically work with an asset management group who would be part of the management of this, who would kind of oversee the vegetation management, who the contractor we use for that. So they'd kind of oversee the overall management of the asset after construction. And ideally, yes, they'd be local or be on site, but tough to tell at this point, depending on availability of employees.
So in your current projects where you have the mowing regularly, biannually or more current or frequent along these corridors, are you hiring the service out? It's not like a worker on site mowing it, or you're hiring it done through a third party?
So yes, most often we are using a third-party contractor. They would be reporting directly to our asset management team, so our operations or asset management team. And I will say, I think you've asked a couple of questions along these lines. Compliance with the permit and with the permit conditions are very important, not only to us as Savion, but are very critical to the status of the special use permit. So that is something that, if we were in violation, we do take that very seriously.
As well as mowing, if you're doing some of this vegetative screening and we have a large storm and trees are down, maintenance as far as that too, dead trees, sick trees,
Yes,
all
so
of it, not just mowing?
the city codes actually specifically references dead or dying trees, so.
Replacement?
There,
Yeah.
we do require, your code does require replacement of those.
Any other questions regarding vegetative screening? We'll give another opportunity to commission members after interested parties. If you think of a question. Cross-examination question. Good. At this time, we would move on to interested parties who wish to speak and more specifically cross-examine, ask questions specifically about the berms and the screening plan. And this, again, is just a cross-examination portion of our evening where you can ask questions, clarifications. We are saving our comments and thoughts towards a testifying portion of the public hearing. So right now, again, just a reminder, this is cross-examining questions. You will have an opportunity to testify as well as we will up here.
The initial individual on the interested party registration sheet is Eric Light.
Also, if this is just particularly on the landscape screening, but you will also be offered an opportunity to speak on the other experts that are here as well, just for clarification.
No, Mr. Light. Next individual on the registration sheet is Andy Cam, C-A-M. Yeah, can you state your name, please?
Yeah, Andrew, last name is Cano. I live at 15115 Miller Road in Plano.
So, sir, you're one of the adjacent property owners to the project?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So you covered quite a few of the questions the council did. The one I had to, specifically about the berm and your plans to reduce it. They put that code in place, I think, in the interest of everybody sitting in this room, as well as everybody sitting up there. So my question to you would be, when you talked about challenges installing the berm, I'm assuming those challenges are probably mostly economic, right? It's more expensive, correct?
There are economic challenges along with the other challenges mentioned, such as the additional construction traffic and intensive use required to both install and maintain those berms.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of trucks. So that's a lot of
It is a lot
wear
of
and tear,
trucks.
unnecessary wear and tear on the road. But there's an offset to that. So my question would be, if the city council grants this variances on your proposed vegetation plan, what would the cost savings be to the Plano Skies LLC?
That is dependent largely upon the variances as they're approved. So that could vary based on, where the screening, where the berming is anticipated to be required, as well as the screening composition in terms of the final plant selections.
Yeah, I was asking specifically about what you proposed tonight. So you had to have something in mind, right? This is what we want to do. This is what you're required to do. So the variance you have, ballpark idea what that's going to be?
Again, it would be a significant range. We don't have a specific number.
I would think we would be interested in figuring out what that is. That's all I had. Thank you.
The next individual on the interested party registration sheet is John Wykes. Could you please approach the microphone and state your name, please?
I'm John Wykes. I live on Sears Road, 14176 Sears Road.
And Mr. Wykes, are you an adjacent property owner to the
Yes.
project?
It's right
Thank you.
across the road from us. I really, in some ways, I'm puzzled. We never got an answer. Evidently, the city council doesn't believe that the township has any bearing on. We took a vote on this last year, and it was pretty overwhelming that we didn't want to have this. So I feel like we're really wasting your time and ours, but we're here because we definitely don't want it. And I was wondering, on Vilman Road, is that one of the places where you're not going to put a berm?
That is correct.
Along that lane and there's a house, there's a buildings, there's two homes on Vilman Road on a lane.
So on the west side of the project, along, parallel to Vilman Road, we are not proposing a berm. However, to the south side of that, where there is a non-participating residential structure, we are proposing a berm in that location.
You're putting a berm along that lane?
To the north,
Yeah,
yes.
well, I'm hoping it never happens, but anyway, I just think that, you get a hailstorm, you get a fire, you get grass in there. We burn our fence lines every year, and boy, it's going to melt. It gets hot for 5 minutes, and it's going to do damage if we get a lightning strike out there. This is very poor way to use Class A soils. I just keep bringing that up, but I'm just trying to put this in your mind. These soils are not just average soils. These are excellent soils, and we're just being very foolish. You got the natural gas isn't the greatest, but the nuclear is, and if we need energy, we need to be wise in what we're doing.
The next individual on the interested party registration sheet is Chris Wykes.
Okay, my question, I'm Chris Wykes, I live on Sears Road. When you came to our home, we told you we wanted a berm. Is that still right on Sears Road? There will be still a berm.
Yes, there will be.
How far? I mean, just in front of our house, or, our land goes from the curve to where CMP or the,
Yes, it is primarily in front of in front of the structures there. It goes a little bit past the structures on either side, but it is all the way across where the structures are.
so like maybe 100 feet?
Let's see.
It's approximately 1,400 linear feet.
Okay. Okay, just want to make sure that you were, still keeping that, even though I'm not for it at all.
Let me circle back. The initial name on the interested party registration sheet was Eric Light. All right, and that would conclude the interested parties who have signed in.
Commission members, any other questions on landscape screening, berming, what they're proposing? With that being,
I do have one question. So, you've heard a lot of questions from the commission here. Is there any appetite to work on some of this to make it better?
Again, this is a preliminary screening plan, so this is what we have proposed. So it is something that we intend to continue discussing.
Thank you.
with no further questions on landscape screening or berming, we can move on to your next witness. If there is a question that arises, whether it be an interested party or one of us up here, we may circle back to this if some of us come up with something for the next meeting. But for now, we are good. Just a reminder, we also will be having public comment for anyone who is wishing to speak later that is not an interested party.
Thought it was on. Thank you. Commission, members of the public, I'm here to discuss the pre-construction sound assessment study for this project.
Mr. Conaway, can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So once again, my name is Michael Conaway. I am employed at Stantec, and I am a senior acoustical engineer. To give a little bit of my qualifications, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering with a major concentration in acoustical engineering from Purdue University, a Master of Engineering in Acoustics from Pennsylvania State University. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Minnesota and New Jersey. I have over 12 years of experience in acoustics and noise control. I'm also a member of the following professional organizations: the Institute of Noise Control Engineering, the Acoustical Society of America. And I have worked on many types of projects of applied acoustics, including renewables, over my 12-year career throughout the United States. So I'm going to start off with give a little bit of basics of sound as a background for my study. So sound is fluctuating, small fluctuations of pressure that we as humans interpret as sound with our ears. Human hearing ranges from 20 to 20,000 hertz. If we look at the keyboard up here, 20 hertz is on the lower end, on the low side of the keyboard, low pitch sounds, and then 20,000 hertz is on the other side, higher pitch sounds. In sound analyses, you can combine them all together into one single number to account for the energy across the whole frequency spectrum. Or you can split them up into different frequency bands to understand how much energy is in different bands. And typically that's split into octave frequency bands is what we call them, and that ranges from 31.5 hertz to 8,000 hertz. Sound is expressed in the units of decibels, and to mimic how we hear as humans, there's an A-weighting network that can be applied so we can use a single number to correlate between different sources that we interpret as humans, and that's expressed as A-weighted decibels, or dBA. You will see that I'll mention later on a lot about dBA. And there are two types of sound levels that I'll be discussing. Sound power level is the first one, and that is the acoustic energy that a source emits no matter the environment that it's in. It's similar to the wattage of a light bulb. Sound pressure levels, on the other hand, is the perceived audible sound at a location, which is dependent on the environment and the distance from a sound source. If we're talking about light bulb equivalents, lumens, better example is when you're close to a light bulb, it's bright, you go farther away, it gets dimmer. Same thing with sound. You're close to a source, it's loud, it gets quieter as you go away. And just a bit of rule of thumb, sound power level is about 32 dB higher than the sound pressure level at 50 feet. So as I mentioned before, sound reduces with distance, but also terrain, ground type, solid structures, and meteorological conditions all affect how sound propagates and reduces. In an ideal situation with just distance attenuation, sound falls off with 6 dB per doubling of distance. So if you go from 5 feet to 10 feet, there's a difference of 6 dB. And to quickly go over some typical sound levels so we'll all have the same reference point, 25 dBA is about the sound of a whisper. 30 dBA is the background sound in a concert hall in your bedroom at night. 40 dBA is a quiet rural area. 50 dBA is running a refrigerator 3 feet away. As you can see, there are many examples on here. I'll just skip down a little bit. 85 to 95 dBA is a typical farm tractor at 25 feet. And just as a reference, when you go up 10 dB, that is perceived as a doubling of loudness. So 50 dB is perceived as twice as loud as 40 dB. Now I'm going to go into more of my sound study and the regulatory environment that applies to the project. So the main regulation is the Illinois Pollution Control Board Title 35 that limits sound from a project to a receiving parcel type. And that is for daytime and nighttime limits. There are specific daytime and nighttime limits. Daytime is referenced as 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Nighttime is 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And the reason why I was discussing octave frequency bands before is that because the limit is in octave frequency bands. I also like to point out that construction noise is specifically excluded under the limit, from these limits under section 901.107. And you can see here up on the screen that there are limits for daytime and nighttime in the different frequency bands. There's a lot of numbers there. I'm just going to simplify it for you. The daytime limit, if you added those all together, would be about 61 dBA. And the nighttime limit would be about 51 dBA, which is, as referring to what I said before, approximately the sound your refrigerator makes when it's running 3 feet away from it. The City of Plano also has regulatory limits, and that's under Title IX, Chapter 7 Noise Ordinance that limits sound from the project to 75 dBA during the day, 55 dBA at night, and those limits must be met at the residences. Just to note that this, excuse me, that these limits are slightly higher than the IPCB limits if we compare A-weight to A-weight. And there are no federal regulations that apply. So I created a 3D noise model to assess compliance with these regulatory limits. This analysis has been carried out at several different locations. First at property line locations, that's four specific locations, and then at residences and commercial uses within a half-mile of the project boundary. That includes 710 residences and 37 commercial uses. To be conservative in my analysis, I compared the sound at commercial uses to the residential limits. The noise model included the proposed site layout, the project topography and the surrounding topography, the two major project noise sources, solar inverter stations and the substation transformer, and then nearby residences. Just as a note, no foliage was included in the analysis for a conservative analysis to make sure that I'm assessing the worst case situation from the project. So at the project property line, the high sound level is 46 dBA during the day and 43 dBA at night. So that's between the sound of a quiet rural area and your refrigerator running at 3 feet. Now, that's the worst-case maximum sound level location. Across the entire property line during the day, it ranges from 35 to 46 dBA. At nighttime, the sound levels are primarily below 20 dBA, which is quieter than a whisper. At residences, it's a little bit more in-depth analysis because there's a lot of receptors, but the highest sound level produced by the project at the closest residential or commercial building is 39 dBA during the day and 35 dBA at night. About a little less quiet than a typical rural area. Here on this table is a breakdown of the sound levels of the number of residences and the sound levels that they receive. On the left is the daytime and on the right is the nighttime. So during the daytime, you'll see that majority of the receptors, all except 37 of them, receive sound levels less than 30 dBA, which is approximately the level that in your bedroom at night, so quieter than that. During the nighttime situation, most residences or commercial uses receive sound levels less than 20 dBA, which is, once again, quieter than a whisper. Because the IPCB limits are in octave frequency bands, I'm not going to show every single receptor. That would be a significant analysis that would go way over everyone's head. But just to simply go over it, I compared the sound levels for daytime and nighttime at every single receptor within half mile and compared it to the IPCB limits I showed previously. And there's compliance in all octave frequency bands for all receptors. In addition, most receptors receive sound levels that are lower than the nighttime octave band sound level limits, even during daytime operations. And with the previous analysis that I showed, there's also compliance with the City of Plano noise regulation of 75 dBA during the day and 55 dBA at night. I'm going to briefly address some construction noise because some questions were brought up on that. Construction activities are temporary in nature. From my understanding from the project, it will last 12 to 18 months. Construction will occur in several phases, though, and the progress is progressive. So as there will be limited heavy construction at one area, a very short amount of time, then move on to some other area and then go all around the site. And that activity will only occur during the daytime hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. As I said, several locations may see the same activity, but it's going to move to other areas. It's not going to be consistently in the same area. It's going to move all around. Typical construction equipment for this project will include backhoes, bulldozers, excavators, trucks, and pile drivers. And any impact for construction noise is expected to be temporary and limited in duration. So that is a brief overview of my sound study that I carried out for this project, and I'm willing to answer any questions that there may be.
So we'll follow the same format where the commission members ask questions first, then we'll move to cross-examination of interested parties. Would it be safe to say that thicker vegetative screening and a berm would help slow sound?
Foliage does reduce sound, but you need a significant distance for that. So you would need on the order of 300, 400 meters of dense trees to get 1 or 2 decibels of sound reduction. Okay. So that, in terms of the sound study, that's not necessary here because we show compliance by a wide margin with all the regulations.
So there really is no way to, if there was any loud sound, to foster that or to diminish it, unless you had a great distance, is basically what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then also your sound studies, are these at, and this might be a question for you guys, when these panels are fully out at full max load, taking on the highest amount of sun, does that change the amount of decibels as they are all working at full max load?
Yeah, yes, it does. And I did consider that this analysis I provide you is the worst case situation, everything operating at 100%.
Anyone questions on sound? In previous projects, you have some back in 2018 to now. Do you have any filed complaints of noise, or if a system breaks? I mean, right now you're doing your studies based on like absolute perfect picture day, all the parts are working. If there's any a maintenance problem, have there ever been any problems where it's a louder sound if, let's say, one of the panels is broken or jarred? His study is during, I mean, you know, where the panels are fully working. Or is there any history of where you've had issues with sound on file?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd have to dig into that a little bit deeper with some of our asset managers of our operating projects, but I have not been made aware of any issues around noise. They are largely pretty silent projects and have remained that way.
Out of all of your components that you have in your project, your panels, your transformers, and all of the different components, what is the largest component, or what is the component that produces the most sound?
The loudest piece of equipment is the substation transformer.
Okay, and if I were to be 50 feet away from it, how loud would it be?
That would be 62 dBA.
Okay, and that is at the southernmost portion of your project, right? Okay. Is there a way to make sure that the sound is not traveling away from that transformer?
There are things that could be implemented to reduce the sound from the transformer, but I just want to reiterate my analysis that we comply with all code limits, and it's very quiet at the project property line and at residences.
And I might have missed this. When you're measuring the 62, how far away are you from the transformer?
That was 50 feet.
50 feet, okay.
The setbacks are 250 feet though, right?
On the substation, I would have to double check on that, but I know it's minimum 150 feet.
So at 150 feet, what would they be?
I
Just
don't-
guess, just guess. Or say, what would you think? 3 times less?
No, it would be approximately, my guess is 4 dB louder from 250 feet to 150 feet.
Okay, because he was asking that 50 feet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
mhm.
so
Yeah,
quieter,
yeah.
okay.
I will add, just kind of looking at some maps with the closest residence to the substation, we're looking at probably 600 to 700 feet. So, and that's a participating property owner as well. So the closest residence really should be minimally impacted. Yeah.
How loud is a car going by? Is it loud? It's louder than that, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Cars are, my rule of thumb is about 69 dB at 50 feet.
Yeah, because where I live, there's, off of El Domain, I live 300 feet off of El Domain, I can hear them all night, really loud. So,
Again, if there was any issues with sound, I'm always thinking worst case scenario, future 5, 10, 15 years, and we do have an issue where there's sound louder than the 62, which you did a very nice job presenting, and I believe that you're very knowledgeable. If there was an issue with sound in the future, again, is that a project management asset manager question?
Yes, you could file a complaint with the asset manager. We would do the needed due diligence to dig into that, and if it is against the code and the ordinance, or if a neighbor was being disturbed by it, we would look into mitigation of that.
Yes, because not to discredit you, I think your study was done very well. But as a resident, if there is a problem in 10 years, we need as a city to be able to protect, the sound of that. So a project asset manager, again, would be in charge. Okay. Any further questions, Commission, on sound? We will now open it to interested parties who wish to ask, cross-examine, or ask questions to the expert here tonight.
Is there any of the four individuals that have previously identified as interested parties have any questions for Mr. Conaway? No.
Oh, Mr. Wikes.
I'm not seeing any.
Nope. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Conway.
Thank you.
For presenting. If, again, we come up with questions for your expert who's not here at the time, can you email and get response back?
Yes.
How many more presenters do you have tonight to discuss?
One presenter.
Okay. Commission, are you good with listening to the final presenter, or do we need a recess? Good? All right, we'll continue with the third presenter.
We have to switch around computers quickly.
There we go. Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, members of the public. My name is Dr. Chris Olson, and I'm going to be here speaking to you about the public health, safety, welfare aspects of the project tonight. I'm going to cover a little bit more on,
Dr. Olson, if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll just, again, similar to Michael, I'll go over some qualifications here. I have a doctorate or PhD in environmental health sciences. I've been a consultant for over 25 years. It's actually getting closer to 30, but it sounds like I'm a little younger if I go with 25. Within that international experience. So I'm actually out of the Toronto, Canada area, but I spent a lot of time here in the Midwest, across the US, across the continent, as well as internationally. As well as being a consultant, I also am a professor and lecturer at the Delaletta School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, where I teach a graduate course in this type of material. I started my career, like most of my colleagues, in oil and gas, emissions from stacks, refineries, and the like. And about 17 years ago, became engaged in the issue on public health, safety, welfare, proper siting, sound, and other things for renewable energy projects. First projects I did here in the state of Illinois, of course, were the wind projects that you folks are all familiar with. Then, of course, now over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, the solar projects, and now we're kind of transitioning also into the battery storage projects. So working at all facets of that. Testified for numerous commissions like yourselves, well over 100 across the country. State level hearings, been under oath, similar to the counselor just putting me here. So everything you're going to hear today is either, these are my beliefs. Yes, I'm being paid by Savion to be here, but these are based on professional credentials and the like. So I did have the opportunity, commissioners and members of the public, to watch the last couple nights of hearings, watch them before coming tonight. Certainly some of the concerns I've heard raised by the commission and the public are very common concerns we hear about solar projects across the country, around the world. The ones I'll focus on tonight are going to be the EMF, or the electromagnetic fields, whether or not the panels have the ability for them to leach chemicals or materials from them and impact soil and groundwater. We'll touch on glare, heat island, sound, and also happy to answer some questions on fire if need be. So as part of the application that Plano Skies put forward to you folks, included an appendix with, I believe it's about 15, 20 pages on the report that I prepared for the project. So it looks at the body of scientific international literature, our own research, but as well as then making it site-specific for Plano Skies and making sure that we're covering off the aspects of the project. Reviewed the layout, reviewed the collector lines, reviewed the sound reports, the glare reports, and all of that, and that's where I'm going to base my opinion on tonight. So it's always, okay, great, so who's this guy, Chris, coming from Canada talking to us all about this? What other sources of information can the Planning Commission, members of the public, the City Council look at? There have been studies done over the last couple decades on solar projects, people living near them, specifically mostly on the topics of things like the EMF, the sound, measuring those things around the projects, as well as this issue around materials in the panels, heat island and the like. So for example, the Ohio Department of Health, the state agency, put out a document a couple of years ago. We've had North Carolina State University put out some material, and there's been a bunch of work early in Massachusetts. Some of the first solar projects were there. So you can look at those types of information as well. So let's jump into it. Things like EMF. So certainly understood there were some concerns last time, and again contained in the report that I provided you. So what is EMF? Basically everything that's plugged in, anything that has electricity running through it, is going to emit an electrical and a magnetic field. All your microphones here, your cell phone, your computers, everything here at the podium, everything in your home that's plugged in or has electricity going through it creates some level of EMF. And it's the M part of the EMF, the magnetic field, that we primarily concern ourselves about. On the right-hand side of the slide there, that is from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences here in the US. The study was commissioned a few years back in order to look at this issue around EMF, and primarily the main cause of concern at the time is the high voltage transmission lines that run right past people's houses. You've got them here in the city, you've got them here in the county. You do have both the high voltage transmission lines as well as the distribution lines that are similar to the collector lines. So when they looked, through all of the, EMF is one of the most studied environmental health concerns over the last 60 years. There's over 25,000 papers published in credible scientific journals. And ultimately, when we look at the level, is it acceptable to be exposed to or not? Typically, like right now, for you folks kind of sitting in the audience, not in your computers or anything else, just with the lights on and that, we're going to be, basically it's like for those of you who are old enough, the Star Trek, when they got those little handheld camcorder things that are walking around and they beep, it's essentially how we measure EMF. It's a specific meter that we can walk around and measure the magnetic field around things. You'd be about 1 to 4 milligauss sitting up there. For you folks sitting near your mics and then your computers, you're going to be somewhere around maybe 5, 10, 20 milligauss. That being said, if you're in your house and the household appliances, things like your microwave are going to emit around 300 to 500 milligauss. If you still have hair and you blow dry your hair, you're about 700 milligauss while you blow dry your hair. We're exposed to EMF all the time, both in our work environments as well as in our daily environment. So when we look specifically then at a solar project in the Plano Skies solar project, the panels themselves do not emit EMF. Okay, so the panels themselves, they're harnessing the sun energy, and then that's going through the collector lines to the inverters, right? And so it's the collector lines that are going to have the DC current going through them to the inverters. It's at the inverter that's going to emit EMF in the magnetic fields, the collector lines, because we're converting that DC or the direct current to alternating current, which is what we're all using for electricity, right? So you're going to have some low level of EMF from the inverter, from the collector lines. You're also then, once you get into the substation, there's going to be EMF from the substation as well. No different though than the EMF coming from any other substation. You've got multiple substations in the community right now. No different. There's nothing unique to a solar project on the EMF side. So let's go through it a bit. The next slide. So I'd say the majority of solar projects that I work on, they don't actually conduct an EMF study. In this case, they did, and it's part of the package that you guys received, or you folks received. And Stantec did the EMF study. Just to kind of go through, EMF drops off very quickly with distance. It exponentially decreases. The best way that I could describe what EMF is that most of us kind of experience, when you're driving, and for those of you who still have an AM radio in your car, and you're coming up to, let's say this is the high voltage transmission line, you're kind of approaching, you got the AM radio going, and as you get there and you're almost right underneath it, it starts to crackle a bit, and then as soon as you leave underneath the line, it stops crackling. That is the electromagnetic fields interfering with your AM radio. So it very quickly drops off. If you see it, like, so for the sources of EMF, in this case, the collector lines, so the top graph there is the amount of EMF. If you're standing right above, if I'm standing right above that collector line, that 34.5 kV collector line, what it would be, and it would, you're give or take about 20 milligauss if you're standing right above it. And you'll see very quickly with distance, you get to about 20 feet away on either side, you're back down to less than what we'd have in our houses. The one on the bottom is that there's a couple of places where they're going to overhead or propose to overhead the 34.5 kV line. That 34.5 kV line is similar to all the distribution lines running in and out of the city, around the county, around the area. They're low voltage, 34.5 kilovolt. You're going to have, if I was standing right underneath it under max load, you'd be about 100 milligauss. And again, you see within 100 feet or so, you're dropping dramatically off right down to background. So what does all that mean? Essentially, if you're in the project area, if you're within the fence line, you may be exposed to low levels, very low levels of EMF from, again, being right above the collector lines, or if you're standing right beside the inverter, or if, workers are working on the substation, you may be experiencing, kind of the 20, 40, 50 milligauss for short periods of time, well below any standard that's health-based or that we're concerned about. Once we get to the fence line and outside the project area, anybody within Plano and any of the local residents, certainly at their homes or even just being in the roadways, well below background areas. So not an issue. And ultimately, we look again, as I was talking about other third-party credible groups. So the National Cancer Institute, the quote that I have on the bottom of the slide, that's Dr. Karen Wingfield. She's an oncologist. As my daughters would tell you, she's a real doctor. And so, quotes from when the NCI looks at this and the like, that they're not concerned about EMF from solar projects causing cancer and the like. If we move on, and I know that there was discussion, you had discussion with the project engineer last time on what's in the panels, can anything leach out over the 35 years, get it into the soil, impacting groundwater. I come from a long line of farmers. I'm certainly well aware that groundwater is we have to protect our soils as well as groundwater. So the first thing that we do when we look at these panels, what do they contain? The majority, over 90% of the panel is comprised of silica, so basically sand-like material, silica, glass, and aluminum. Now there is trace components of metals in some of the, the connectors and everything else and the like. But if you look at that, and then in the, I think we were talking about cadmium telluride a little bit last time in the glass. So what is that? So if you take a look at your cell phone, right? So we're all walking around with these. The glass on your cell phone is very similar to the glass in the solar panels, okay? It does contain PFAS materials. Now in this case, the type of panels they're proposing probably won't have PFAS, that may have the telluride associated with the like, but there's a lot more concentrated stuff in this than there is in the solar panels. But why can we all walk around with these every day and not be concerned? It's because it's all encased. There's nothing leaching out of your cell phone, even if you damage the screen. If you think about like 10 years ago, you looked at your screen funny, the thing would crack, right? And then now, it's very hard to, I could pretty much take this, I'm not gonna do it, but throw it across the stage, screen's gonna be fine, because the technology's improved. Nothing's gonna leach out of this, same thing with the solar panels, even if damaged. So if you think about the times where you damaged your cell phone screen, you still walked around with it for 2, 3, 5 months, 2 years, and eventually maybe you got it fixed or got a new phone. The reason you could do that, there's nothing coming out of it. Same thing with the solar panels. So a couple things in terms of extreme weather events, right? Certainly aware that this is an area where you can have tornadoes, you can have high wind events and the like. The way that the geotechnical engineers look at and the way that they install these solar projects is the reason they do all the geotechnical engineering and how deep they put the piles in. At a minimum, they're withstanding 100-mile-an-hour wind, so even a light tornado. If you actually had a direct tornado strike, there was one a couple months back in Indiana where there was, a tornado. It has to basically go right through the center of the project. You will have mangled panels that's going to tear panels from the racking system. You're not usually looking at panels being thrown, outside property lines or anything else. You're really much more concerned about houses, barns, silos, all the things that aren't as well engineered and structured into the ground. That said, it can happen, but even if a tornado came through, it's a physical debris cleanup issue. There's nothing leaching from the panels. It's not going to impact soil or groundwater, even if that damage occurred. Same thing with hailstorms. Panels are designed and they're tested and rated for at least 2-inch size hailstones coming down at 50 miles per hour. Now, that said, there have been some projects across the country where, we're getting golf ball size or baseball size hailstorms where it's damaging your car windshields, it's denting your thing. Bad hailstorms are not good for a lot of things. But that said, even then, again, it's like if we've had a couple projects damaged across the country, what it does is, again, basically it looks like when you break your cell phone, where it's not shattering glass and things going everywhere. You're basically spider web. You're damaging the panels. Panels don't work. Panels have to be replaced. Again, that's why they have insurance that come in, they replace. So even under those extreme weather events, there's nothing that's going to leach or get into the soil or the ground. It's a physical debris cleanup issue. It doesn't impact soil, surface water, vegetation, the like. If I move on here. I'll touch briefly on glare. Glare for the panel, the easiest way for everybody to think about glare off of the panels is, when you're following a car and it's usually kind of around just before sunset or just after sunrise, and you get that sharp glare light, and sometimes it's almost blinding off the windshield ahead of you in the car. That's glare. The difference between that glare that you experience every day when you're driving around versus the solar panels, of course, they're meant to absorb the light. If you look at that thermometer that you've got on your slide deck there, solar panels this is like relative reflective light and glare intensity. The solar panels right down near the bottom, 2 to about 4%, whereas you can see just even bare soil in the fields, right? So when the farmers are just before they're disking and seeding in the area, bare soil is going to have more glare. Certainly if you get into snow cover and everything else. That said, the FAA required, or the Federal Aviation Administration required that you do glare analysis, primarily for any airport that has an air traffic control tower, so that anybody physically looking out of and monitoring the planes, that they weren't getting glare, because we put solar panels, of course, all around our major international airports now. We're trying to protect them. In fact, they removed the requirement to do it for pilots and for the pilots' takeoff and landing, because again, pilots get way more glare off the buildings at the airport, off of the water bodies that they're landing near, everything else. But you still have to do it. So the project did do a glare analysis. Again, Stantec did a glare analysis. All those crazy numbers and everything else. All this is they looked at throughout the entire project area, all the roadways where panels are going to be located nearby. They did the airports as well as the homes. And so in that glare analysis, and this is a standard, similar to what Michael does when he uses an international standard model for the noise assessment, this is a US FAA approved model for doing glare analysis for homes, roadways, and then the control towers. So the good news is when they looked at they didn't need to do it for the pilot takeoff and landing approaches, but they did. So in all your local airports, there's no issues with the 12 runways for the pilots taking off and landing. And most importantly, for that air traffic control tower, that there was no issues for the glare for those. The project's just quite simply too far back from the airport. Interestingly, in this project, most of the projects that I work on, there's some level of glare that's going to be experienced at the roadway or potentially even at neighboring homes. The way that the project's designed, the way they have the orientation of the panels and everything else, is that there was no glare predicted for any of the roadways as people are driving around, and certainly not for people and the houses in the area. So that's a good thing. You won't have a glare nuisance from this project. Heat island often comes up. Essentially, heat island, if you think about today, it was about, 90 degrees out or something today. If you're standing in the Walmart parking lot or a large box store parking lot or any parking lot, you're standing there that 90-degree day, it's going to feel like it's about 105 degrees when you're standing in the parking lot. If you kind of remove yourself from the parking lot into the grass field next door, that very quickly goes down. You get back to just your typical 90 hot degree day. That's about 100, 110. Solar projects themselves made just immediately above the panel, like when I say inches above the panel, might have a very slight temperature change immediately above the panel. There's no heat effect, just immediately adjacent and offsite of the panels. So we're not impacting local crops, we're not impacting the pollinator species, any of that. It doesn't attract extreme weather. We've got solar projects that are gigawatt or 1,000 megawatts in, across the country in agricultural areas. And they, just empirical evidence of this is you think about all the ground cover that these folks are installing all underneath the panels and that, it certainly isn't impacting even just right there the vegetation on site. So there's no impact to the local neighboring adjacent farmers especially, which is one of the concerns. Okay, I'm going to touch a little bit on sound again and kind of emphasize what Michael talked about, maybe some of the stuff that you folks were talking about before. So that green box there that you're seeing, that's the inverter, okay? And so what you see, what happened was, and I think one of the questions, Madam Chair, you might have posed is, do we get noise problems from solar projects? The answer is in the past, we did, and mainly the community solar projects, the very small kind of 1 to 5 megawatt projects. And the problem there was we were sticking those green boxes right at the fence of the project, and the house was literally, 20, 40, 50 feet next door. And what the noise is from these boxes, similar to a transformer, and you've all heard it, you've all stood near, one of these green boxes, where you hear that kind of hum, the zzz, like that's the noise you're getting, okay? If you put these things too close to people's homes, I wouldn't recommend it, because then it's just going to be, first of all, it won't comply with the state or your local statute. And most importantly, yeah, we don't want that to happen. So what we do is we better strategically, especially with these larger projects, we put these inverters interior to the project to make sure, and that's how we know that we've got that distance separation Michael was talking about. Talk a little bit about that. I know that last time around you folks were asking about for the OSHA standards, and that what Michael was telling you about, like, this difference between sound power and sound pressure level. What he's got in his model report is and I'm going to screw this up, in the model report, sound pressure level, and then so the sound power level, what you're experiencing, so the 91 or whatever he's got for the box is actually going to be more equivalent to about 60 if you're standing there. There's no requirement for the on-site maintenance staff or anybody else, or you can stand there all day long. The OSHA standard is 85 decibels over an 8-hour period. You must wear hearing protection. There's no need to wear hearing protection, whether you're in a solar project right beside the inverters or even if you're at the transformer substation. And so that's part of the panels themselves do not emit noise. You're really talking about just the inverters, and there's quite a few of them, and then the substation equipment. So as we look at this, so the next figure, this is out of Michael's report. The red sort of dots that you see there, those are actually the inverters. So you'll see that they're kind of placed strategically interior to the project. Why they're kind of red there is that's the highest sound level being right around them. And the lines as you kind of come out are going to be the lines, the kind of magenta or the purpley ones, those are the homes. So he looks at all the homes in the area. He looks at the adjacent lot lines and property lines. And what you saw from Michael's table is that most homes, and the majority of homes, the majority of properties, neighboring properties, are going to experience an extremely low level of sound. It's like 20 to 30 decibels at nighttime. Inaudibility is not a criteria, but in this case, this project it's very hard to hear these projects, even if you're standing at the fence line, okay? Because you're just talking about these inverters in the substation. And again, the substation, no different than that. The Illinois Pollution Control Board's sound standard is actually amongst the most stringent in the country. And as Michael was talking about the kind of 51 at night, in fact, you're really going to be rate limited at sort of 47. Because of the way those crazy octave bands work, at 1,000 hertz, you get rate limited there. So really 47 is going to be the limit at the property line, then at the homes. And you'll see from the slide, having even 39 at the daytime in the homes, less than 35 at night, those are the maximum homes, as he showed you, much less than that. When we deal with sound from a public health, safety, welfare standpoint, the first and foremost is nighttime sound is so that everybody continues to get a good night's sleep over the 35 years. You've all had a couple of nights where you didn't sleep well. All sorts of bad things start happening to you. The reason we have sound limits at nighttime is to make sure we're protecting sleep, because if you don't protect sleep, bad things then occur after that. The daytime sound limits are meant to make sure that it's the amenity, the use of our property. We don't change the way we're using our property now, and that's where we're seeing for this project. In terms of, Madam Chair, your question about what happens in 10 years, 15 years. So unlike the turbines, the wind turbines, which you do a lot of work on those as well, over the course of years, you may get mechanical failure, you may get, grinding of the gears, you can get gearbox issues, all sorts of, and those are real issues, and they have to be fixed, and then you have to come in. On these inverters and on the transformer of the substation, you're really not going to get that change, but if for some reason you did have a malfunction in one of the inverter box or the transformer, there's a couple of things that protect you, I think, as both the city as well as from the state. First of all, they have to, regardless of whether you folks have a noise level or not, they have to, by law, comply with the IPCB standard. If they're out of compliance with that, they have to rectify it. So how do you know that? Again, you make the complaint, you can do it, typically that would come through the company. Then, I would also suggest they file that complaint with the city, right? So they've got this, and then they go out and they have to measure it, rectify it, whatever. Ultimately, they can also make a complaint, an individual can make a complaint to the IPCB, and then they have to follow up. So there's a number of things that protect you. They're not allowed, if they're acting out of compliance, I'm going to play lawyer for a second, which is always dangerous. I like to do so on TV and on stage sometimes. If they're out of compliance, then they're not in compliance with your CUP issuance, so they cannot be out of compliance. On the construction sound, again, there's no question that construction can be annoying. Okay, we're not going to pretend like we're going to hide that there's going to be construction noise. Again, it's going to be for small period or short periods of time around people's homes. That 12 to 15 months or 18 months of construction, really the time where it's going to be loud, and it could be, again, date. The key here is your city ordinances require that construction only be conducted between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Most other jurisdictions will allow you to go till dusk or even to 10 p.m. So if you look at the Illinois Pollution Control Board standard, it's 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. You guys have actually restricted it more down to 7 p.m., which is good. So you're going to get some daytime construction noise. No question it can be irritating for a couple days or a week or two when it's around your house. But it's no different than, and especially in this community, again, having said that, come from a long line of farmers, you know that when combining is happening, you know that when you're planting and the tractors and they're in the field, that's the same kind of level of noise that you're talking about. So yeah, it's going to be, periodic around the time. You are going to have the pile driving and the like, which again will be short term and then move on. Most of that construction period in those areas, of course, is then once they've got the piles in, once they've done all of the grading, it's just merely guys putting up racking systems and placing panels on racks. That's the bulk of the construction. So we certainly, we are aware that, people are going to be potentially for a couple of days nuisance. It's no different than any other construction noise. If you've ever lived in a community or a neighborhood, or if you've had a neighbor building a house next door to you, that's quite a bit of noise going on for several months, having that construction happen next door. So we recognize it certainly won't be a public health, safety, welfare issue. It's going to be a nuisance. I know there's been issues or questions raised about livestock and wildlife and noise from the project. Again, remember that those inverters are actually fairly quiet when you're even at 50 feet. No different than the substations that are already there. Not proposed for this project, from what I understand, is, there's this concept of agrivoltaics where we graze sheep, and now we're even looking at cattle at some sites across the country. They're not impacted by the sound. These are low levels of sound that the livestock are used to every day when they're in your community in this rural area. In terms of the wildlife, no question, during construction, four-legged wildlife, and I recognize this is an area where I'm sure there are a lot of people who enjoy hunting. Like any other construction, deer will tend to move away, not move out of the county or the state, but they will avoid, of course, during the day, construction noise. But there's every indication, once again, very low levels of sound. So once construction's done in that area, that we don't see issues around solar projects where wildlife, deer, the like, leave the area. So overall, when I look at specifically to the Plano Skies solar project, when I look at the layout, when I look at the noise requirements, all of that, I would put to you, members of the commission and the public, that the project is properly sited and will avoid any issues on public health, safety, welfare. Sorry for a bit of the long university lecture there, but happy to answer any questions that you folks might have.
Commission members?
You mentioned pile driving. They're going to drive the posts in and no concrete?
I'll take a crack at answering this just to make sure. Yeah, the reality there is that they do geotechnical engineering. Typically, the piles will be driven in between 7 and 10 feet, depending on the area. That's what the geotechnical engineers will do. There's no concrete for a solar project for piling.
That's accurate.
And Commissioner, I'd like to point out that you spell your name incorrectly. It's Commissioner Olson, is it not?
Yeah.
I spell my name a little differently. I'm sorry. I'm just joking. Sorry.
I like to think my name's right.
Well, I thank you for traveling a great distance and putting on a presentation. You quickly scooted around the topic of what is in these solar panels, and you glossed over the fact that cadmium telluride is a part of it. And if there was a large hailstorm, you said it was like a cell phone crashing. So question one would be, if it was a hailstorm, monumental, worst case scenario, and they were shattering into the solar panels, not all of them, but even just an isolated storm, are these panels going to shatter? Will they break off into pieces?
So the majority of where we've had those issues, even on the older projects that were less tempered, the glass was less tempered than it is today, where I was getting around that is, or what I was suggesting that, it's like when you break your cell phone screen, if you've ever had your cell phone screen, like that full spider web of it, it stays intact, right? You don't have just like glass shattering off of your cell phone. Like that is what we see at these projects. Even with the, and it's certainly not meaning to skirt around cadmium telluride, there are only limited panels that actually employ the cadmium telluride in it, but even then, cadmium telluride is in a solid state embedded within the panels. It's not coming out of the panels. And so even, let's say, Madam Chair, even there have been some of the older projects where there was some glass then, shards onto the farm field of the leased landowner. It's not leaving the project. Again, it is a cleanup issue. There's nothing leaching out of that glass. Typically what we saw, there's two projects that I could think of where there was some minor amount of glass that was then deposited after they removed the panels. What they do is basically they disc the field. It's just glass on the existing landowner's leased land. It's not leaving the site. There's nothing going to leach out of that glass and then into the soil or groundwater. So for the most part, we don't see any, certainly not widespread glass or shattering under these extreme events. The two I can think of most recently, there was one in Texas a couple years ago,
yeah.
and then the other one, there's one in Nebraska. It really becomes a damaged panel issue, and similar to replacing your phone, they have to replace the panels. So what it really comes down to then is recycling a whole lot of panels, off-site, and then the expense and replacing.
But it must be of a concern because the EPA does a toxicity characteristic procedure to make sure that they're not contaminating over years. And then along with that, which has always been a hang-up for me, is we're doing these based on studies that are 5 years. I mean, what would be 20 years? I mean, if let's say there was a cleanup and then we have these shards of glass, worst case scenario, although it would be nice if they would stay intact, but let's say shards of glass are in the ground. Now we're 20 years down the line. Do we have any studies that are beyond the 5 years, 10 years? What is the longest study as far as the toxicity of, specifically the telluride is probably my most concerned.
Sure.
Where do those studies go as far as longevity into the past?
So the first thing I'd say is, so you talked a little bit about the T-clip analysis the last time, right? So the toxicity characteristic leaching procedure. What that is actually meant for is not making sure that the panels as they're sitting in the field and everything else are safe. What it really is it's an it's an EPA test. It's called EPA 1311 is the test. What they do is they take the panels, they grind them up. Okay, so they got to grind up the panels. And then what they do is they stick it in an acid test. So they subject it to acid for 18 hours. Then after that, they then measure what's in the liquid of that, including, so for the cadmium telluride, it would be any leaching potential of cadmium from the panels. So they actually do that. So under the first solar panels that they're proposing here, they actually have done that T-clip analysis. What that is for is that says, can I stick whether it's a solar panel, whether it's soil, whether it's any other type of material, in order to take it into a licensed landfill, you have to pass that test. So it doesn't matter what the material, and it's meant to simulate that 50 years of weak acid coming through your landfill, going through the panels, even if they were all broken up, and then getting into the groundwater system.
But I mean, it would be safe to say if we're testing it so heavily for a landfill, that if it was to break on open soil, that would be possibly something of concern, if we're worried about a landfill.
No, so what in fact, you don't even have to do the test, is what I'm saying. It's a voluntary test that they've been doing because they want to show that even under extreme conditions, that even if it was under those extreme conditions, it would not impact the soil or the groundwater. Okay. It is very common with any building material. Like, if you think about like all of the different things, think about just, having your barn, having, your foundation of your house. These are all things that we're putting stuff into the environment all the time. That test is meant to make sure that we are protecting the environment. In terms of, sites that have been in operation over time, so there are several sites where you've got projects where they've been in, existence for 5, 10, 15 years, where some of that testing has been done. But we know just because it's embedded in the material, just physical sciences side of things, that it's not going to occur. In terms of where your protection is on cleanup, so Think about it from this, so the Illinois Department of Environmental Protection, right? So IDEP, if you had an event come through, so such as in Nebraska, such as what happened in Texas, after cleanup, they were required to test the soil and then, or test the groundwater. In fact, they just did the soil test because they knew that they had an impact. So after the cleanup, so IDEP actually has the jurisdiction there. And what I would put to you, if let's say they didn't order them, under, let's say there was an extreme event and they did a cleanup, and if they didn't order them, something that you at the city could then ask the state to say, we want you to have them do it, or you could come to them. And, absolutely, that would be reasonable to say if there was an extreme event, they had to replace panels, and I don't know a company that wouldn't, now I'll just commit them to it today. If they had an extreme event where a tornado came through, or, hundreds, thousands of panels shattered and, having to deal with it, it is something that would be fairly common to do that kind of post-cleanup soil to demonstrate what I'm telling you is true. But like everything else, like we have many different structures, many different, things we have in the environment where we don't have 40 years of testing because they haven't been up 40 years, but because of the science and the nature of what we know and how they're embedded in panels, it's just like, why can we carry our cell phones around and know that we're safe? It's because of that. And so that's where we rely on those studies. And again, if you look at North Carolina State and some of the other studies that have come out, they're the ones that are backing up as well. So I certainly understand the concern because we don't want to impact the soil or the groundwater, certainly the groundwater in the area.
I mean, historically, we thought asbestos was a great product to put in homes. Turns out it creates mesothelioma. I don't think that anyone projected that. I'm sure many people did lots of testings projecting that it was going to be safe for all. We come to find out 30, 40, 50 years later that it's super dangerous. So that's where I'm always getting to the bottom of like these testings. That is a great 5-year test that it might not influence livestock and all of these things, but ultimately we are relying on just not real long-term data.
So Madam Chair, it's specifically because of things like asbestos, right? Where like back in the 50s, 60s, we wrapped everything in asbestos. And then in the 70s, we realized this was not a good idea anymore because of the testing that was done. Things like cigarette smoking where, hey, doctors recommend you smoke 3 smokes a day and everything else.
Yes.
But again, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? I mean, smoking, the Surgeon General said as early as the 50s, do not smoke, it's going to cause cancer. Right. It's specifically because of, and then other, chemical issues, refineries, things like that. Because of issues that we had in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the EPA created in 1970, right, is specifically because of those lessons learned when we look at things like the sound, like on the metals and everything else, because of that long history of understanding and the much more rigorous testing done now, the materials engineers and how they are all embedded and being able to say, so if you, for example, if you were to look up on the EPA website, they will say, there's nothing on the EPA website that says solar panels are toxic. What the EPA says is if you want to put them in landfills, which we don't typically do anymore, if you want to put them in a landfill, you have to do the T-clip analysis to simulate over a 50-year period. So it's really having learned those lessons over the decades that we don't just do things that we shouldn't be doing anymore. Now, do accidents and malfunctions occur? Yes, but usually now we're talking about like liquid issues. We're talking about, contaminant issues that are not with fully embedded, just typical material like we're looking at here. And certainly, again, you could always require soil testing, right? I mean, that the proof is in the pudding if you wanted to say, after decommissioning. But again, we're confident that that would be the case.
In your history of shattered panels, Texas being the most recent with the most nationwide recent one, is it possible to, if there was a catastrophic shattering, is it possible to clean up? How does that cleanup go? Do they remove topsoil around the panels? What does that look like? I understand it's not like leaching out Ninja Turtle green slime. I get the imagery of that, but it's more of if it is shattered and there are glass, right now we don't believe that it would leach our water, but is there a way to properly clean up in those situations where you remove so much soil, or what does that look like, I guess, worst case scenario?
Right, so in fact, worst case scenario in all of there was no soil removal done, okay. There was none of that, and the reason why is, again, because first and foremost, it's on leased property, right? So it's the landowner's property, it's with the company, the lawyers and whatever, when they get involved. But ultimately, when you look at the testing done, there's nothing going to come out. There's no impact to the soil or the groundwater. And ultimately, what you're not talking about, massive amounts of glass just falling on a farm field. You're talking about potentially some small shards. Typically, what's happened is it's tilled under, and then because it's not leaching, it's not moving. Those physical shards are not leaving the property. They're not moving anywhere. Nothing's coming out of them. So, that's kind of what you're looking at in that respect. And again, then, ultimately, none of the projects that I'm aware of, again, I believe there's been 4 across the country over the last 20 years where this has been an issue. None of those have had any soil removal or anything to that extent.
All right, thank you. Commission members, any other questions for Doctor here? If you think of any after public comment, you're more than welcome. I would imagine you're probably flying back.
Oh, yeah, no, and I mean, I'm usually in Illinois once a month or so, but I mean, certainly any additional questions that come up, I'm assuming the process, like many other Illinois proceedings through them, I'm happy to either respond in writing, or if they really need me to come back, I can as well.
Yeah. We can always email if we come
Yeah.
up with a question after the fact. We will now move to interested parties who wish to cross-examine currently.
Are there any of the 4 individuals who signed the interested party registration sheet like to ask any questions of Dr. Olson? Please approach the microphone and state your name, please.
Yes, I'm John Wykes from Sears Road, 176 Sears Road. I've heard, it was quite a while ago, but I thought I heard that in some places, in some states, they've outlawed farming on the property after they've taken the solar panels off. I heard that in Idaho or somewhere they had outlawed that. Is that a fact, or?
No, I mean, it's certainly a good question. In fact, there was a rumor on the internet that somehow potato farmers in Idaho would not farm the land afterwards. To the best of my knowledge, it's never happened. I mean, again, what you're talking about, there's nothing, in fact, when you look at what happens from a soil science perspective, you essentially take land that was being tilled in agriculture or pasture land, and now you let it go fallow for 30 years. So it's like you're putting it into conservation land for 30 years. The soil quality is going to be better than it was when you started. And ultimately, again, this is on farmers' land that are leasing the land, and when they get it returned, or when it's returned, absolutely they can still farm it. So no, this is stuff that is coming onto the internet that I think unfortunately is just not quite true.
Well, how much, say, in a really bad windstorm, I saw a windstorm this spring as we were heading down 47, there was a windstorm in a solar panel place. I mean, it was pretty tore up. How many panels usually get busted up, and what size shards of glass are there usually in that?
So even in an extreme windstorm, so at 100 miles an hour wind, sustained winds, you're not going to have damage to the panels. They're not going to be torn off the racks or anything else like that. It really requires the handful of projects where there was an issue on the actual project, and again, very localized. So if you look at, for example, this is an array, it's a smaller solar project array. It would be as if the tornado would have to go right down through an EF2 or greater tornado, 130, 40 mile an hour tornado going through, and it really is just going to rip up almost like a small swath in the center of that. And again, the panels are, the ones that we've seen, we're not seeing panels discarded on neighboring properties or anything else like that. We're not getting large shards of glass or anything else. In a case of a tornado, you're much more concerned about the homes, the other structures in the area and the debris from those. So, certainly it can occur. They are rated to very high levels of wind sustainability. And ultimately, just like anything else, if a tornado comes through, unfortunately, there's a lot of debris cleanup, and hopefully, everybody's been safe, which isn't always the case, of course.
Well, that was just a curiosity I had.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
You state your name, please.
Chris Wykes, Sears Road. In your expertise, how safe, I mean, you think solar fields are totally safe to live by. Is there any distance that you would say is a recommended distance to live from one, this size?
Yeah, so if you think about, there actually, distance isn't a concern for a solar project, and hear me out as the reason why, for the most part. We put solar panels on our roofs. We put solar panels, like if you think about, many agricultural areas, you'll see farmers put, solar panels in their front yard in order to help power the houses. There's nothing coming from the panels themselves that are a concern. In terms of like what is safe, this is where, it's really the sound level that we're concerned about. And that's why putting the inverters interior to the project and then having, those distances more from a sound perspective is the concern on solar projects. But quite literally, I mean, again, we have solar panels on commercial buildings, on parking lots, on our own homes. So there's nothing from a physical safety or chemical safety standpoint. It really is trying to make sure that we get the sound levels right so that it's not disturbing people.
Okay, but when it's this size, 1,500 acres plus, and we will be impacted, we're sort of three-sided, we're sort of a little island.
Right.
And according to the World Health Organization, they say, there's really no safety, but they strongly recommend that you live 1,640 feet from any large scale.
I've never seen that from the WHO, from the World Health Organization. I mean, I'd be happy to have you show me that after. As far as I'm aware, the WHO has, I mean, if you think about all of the solar projects across the world, not just here in the United States, in Europe, in Australia, everywhere else, the typical setback that you see in the United States, so including here in Illinois, the state setting setback's 150 feet, is it not, here in Illinois, to homes? That is pretty typical across the U.S. Some maybe at 200, 250 feet. I think the closest home to a panel here is 200 feet. You have other states where it's 50 feet. So again, and I certainly appreciate that, being surrounded on three sides, that's a whole nother issue you have to deal with these folks on. But from a public health, safety, and welfare standpoint, your property, you've heard from the noise guys, we've looked at the report, your sound levels are going to be quite low at your property. From a physical safety standpoint, I wouldn't be concerned, but in terms of visual and that's kind of beyond, that's these guys, not me.
Yeah, I just got my information from the internet, which is so trusted, this AI stuff. And I mean, and it says, the World Health Organization says
And
1,640.
I would love to meet with you after and just to look that up. I mean, I know that sometimes people will quote things like that on other sites. I'm certainly not aware of the WHO ever having put that out, but I'd be happy to take a look at where you've seen that, and then we can discuss it.
I'll show you.
No, please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other interested parties?
Commission members, any other questions for Dr. Olson? I do have one quick one, and it might not be for Dr. Olson, it might be for somebody else. But because it pertains to, I feel like, health and safety issues, if there was, I know we've talked about hail and tornado, since it is, what do we call it, a heat island, I guess, is the, right? Is that what the word was?
That's
Yeah.
what people can be concerned about.
Okay.
They don't really actually generate a heat island, but go ahead with your question, Madam Chair.
So let's say the inverter, or there was a fire again. Do we have like a current fire system plan in place? Is that relying heavily on the City of Plano firemen? What are the safety protocols in place for catastrophic windy day, drought, fire in this particular area? And then are you working with the Plano Fire Department or the City of Plano to have additional backup? What does that look like for water? Just walk me through that if that was to happen, since we're in the health and safety issue.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I might, I'll start with the kind of fire aspect and then turn over the emergency response plan and what they've done with the fire chief back to the company. So if you were to pull up your sound slide that has the inverter box on it, essentially, so panels themselves, again, don't catch fire. What can occur, and again, very rare, but what can occur, because they're inverters can catch fire. The way that the inverters are designed is that they're placed on, they're put on a concrete slab, and then typically around that, there will be gravel around the inverters. So if you have an inverter fire, it's the inverter itself that you're dealing with, not a spread of fire to the panels or to the neighboring grass or whatever have you. Same thing with the substation. Again, you can have transport. Happens all the time across the U.S. I mean, it's still very rare, but we do have substation fires. That's why we gravel substations, fence them, and the like. So the fire department your fire department will be familiar with how to deal with an inverter fire or transformer fire. That is, they come, they show up, they watch it burn for a couple hours, and they just put up a perimeter. The bigger concern for solar projects, and again, where they have occurred, again, very rare, is kind of, especially if you're in pasture land or that kind of area, where it's a grass fire or a pasture land fire or crop fire coming onto the site. Not usually started on the solar project, but certainly, we had one in Kansas back in the early or late spring, where again, fire came from off-site to on-site. It was very dry in the Midwest, certainly over in that area, in the Kansas, Missouri, sort of Nebraska area. There were a lot of wildfires. There will be an emergency response plan. The company will come up with the local fire department, with the chief. There'll be training. I do believe they've met already with the fire chief and staff. In order, prior to construction, they will be having to require an emergency response plan. And I think one of the company representatives said earlier on the fire, so if, let's say, you did have a fire coming onto the site, the couple that we've seen, for the most part, even with the low-lying vegetation, let's say, it doesn't tend to be as dry as maybe the surrounding, but if it was, like the one in Kansas, for example, that happened recently in Barber County, we actually saw the fire come on through the site, portion of the site, leave the site, and the project never stopped operating. Now, there are other projects, like it just burned right quick through, and the fire departments, for solar projects, are never asked to save the equipment. It's always about, they're trying to perimeter to make sure that it's not spreading, but certainly it's always health, safety, homes, businesses, everything else. That said, if there was a sustained fire on the site, underneath the panels themselves don't catch fire, they essentially melt. So there's no toxic off-gassing or fumes from that. So really what we're trying to make sure on any of these projects, and I'll let the company representative speak to it, is making sure the fire department's aware. There's usually a Knox box at the gates and the fence so that the fire department can access, let's say if there was a transformer fire. All of that'll be drilled, they'll do all that, and all of it's at the expense of the company, so maybe, and I can turn it back to you.
Yes, so we submitted a preliminary emergency response plan with the application. It's pretty bare bones right now because it does require a very, very close coordination with all of the first responders. So we will be working with the fire department, police department to figure out exactly how they would prefer to deal with it, additionally with our expertise of how to deal with it. So we will work with them very closely prior to starting construction. As Chris mentioned, we have already begun those discussions a little bit. That was part of the site plan review board that was required for the application, was with representatives from both the fire department and police department. And we already kind of started getting into some of the details about how do we know during construction what area you're working in, and how are we going to break up the site to know exactly where to go?
Because there won't be water lines, correct?
Yes, correct.
So typically, there won't be a hydrant out there. So what they'll have is they'll have their pump trucks, right? And this is all part of the emergency response plan and meeting with the local fire chief. You'll have pump trucks that, just like if you have a house on fire out in that area, there's no lines coming up to fight the fire there. They'll have their pumper trucks, and they'll have a water shuttling agreement locally, again, to deal with any other fire, and just certainly grass fires, right? So that'll all be part of the discussion. And then again, if, for whatever reason, typically the good thing about, this kind of solar fields and that, there is some fire break within them because of some of the gravel, because they're, crossing the road. But yeah, it can occur, but it would be.
And just for clarification, the fire primarily would happen in the inverter, not anywhere on the panel or the connection.
That's right.
Did you ever have fires and connections with where the power is leaving the panel, going into the connector, other than the inverter?
It's typically at the inverter.
Typically,
So,
or
like,
could it happen at a panel?
I'm not aware of one where it's actually from the panel to the connect. It could theoretically occur from the panel through the wiring there. Again, that's why everything has to be done up to NEC code, the National Electrical Code and everything else. Could that ever occur? I'm not, it's electrical. The majority would be at the actual inverter itself, and that's why we have to make sure they're gravel padded.
Is there maintenance, or when you refer to some of these groups or agencies that are conducting these, who we are supposed to call as the city of Plano if there's an issue, are they doing annual inspections? Are they walking the perimeter to make sure that they're in compliance with the protocols for in case of wire is exposed? Or is that something that, like,
So-
fire safety is?
I'll start with the construction side, and then I'll turn it over to the company to talk about that. Under the construction side, in order for them to get their insurance, in order for the, I mean, you don't have a building inspector that's gonna go out and look to make sure everything's done in National Fire Code, right? They have third-party electrical people that go in for every point, every junction, the inverters, the entire site, where they have to certify. So those are, they're putting their stamp in, and, you know, and their insurance on the line as the inspectors, right? So just like most other things, it's not just like your house where you folks will have building inspectors that go in and make sure the electrical was done and hooked up properly. So they'll have third parties doing it. All that will be kept in records. In terms of the maintenance and inspection side, I'll turn back to Anna.
And specifically, question engineered for, like, again, a 5, 10, 15-year timeline. Are we inspecting them? Are you guys inspecting these for fire safety and general health concerns in a timely manner? Or what does that look like? What are you required from the state of Illinois, as well as maybe what other agencies you're working with?
Yeah, so less specifically to agencies, but we do what's called a golden row. So we have during construction, and this kind of lasts throughout operations as well, is we assemble and construct the perfect row, and it gets observed by every single person that's involved. The city officials who are doing inspections will come out, our EPC construction contractors will be out there, the fire department will be out there, police department, so everybody knows exactly what the perfect standard is for these projects, and everybody knows what to be looking for, and then that inspection kind of continues throughout site, throughout the entire project. There's constantly people out floating around site, whether they're mowers, whether they're just observing things, checking on things. We also have 24/7 monitoring of all of the panels. So in the situation that a wire got chewed by a random animal and it got exposed, we would know within a moment's notice that those panels went down, and somebody would be out checking that upon the first safe time to do so. So that monitoring kind of allows us to inspect remotely, even if there's not somebody on
And
site.
obviously, you want to protect your investment, but is there any requirement through the state of Illinois other than your own personal?
We can check on that, Madam Chair. I don't think there is, and here's the reason why I'm saying that is because, again, so if you think about your house, right? So if you're going to do a new build home in the city right now, you're going to have an inspector come out and look at it. They're not coming back every 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. If you've got a warehouse, if you've got any other industrial activity within the city or the county, you're not being re-inspected over a 5 or 10, 15-year period, right? And the one advantage that one of the advantages of a project like a solar project or a wind project, because they're so heavily monitored, and as Anna was just saying, like, they know if something's going to short, they know if something's going to happen. So could something happen and occur, just like, you know, you can have a house fire because, you know, somebody was doing something in the house they shouldn't have done. So typically the inspections, the rigorous inspections are done construction prior to energizing the system. And then, you know, at that point, we can check though to see if there's any Illinois requirement. It would surprise me that there would be, but certainly the company can check.
Yeah, and I also just want to add for clarification purposes, of course, the fire department and police department would have full access to the site regardless if somebody is there to let them in. They will have access via a Knox box, so given that it's 2 a.m. and something happens and they're made aware of that, they have access to the site to be there and control that situation.
Is it staffed at night?
No, it is not.
Just
typically.
daytime, 3
Yes.
daytime staff?
The monitoring, the remote monitoring is 24/7, but
Through
actual
cameras?
on-site.
Pardon me?
Through cameras?
No,
No,
it's not cameras, so it's the monitoring of the actual panel production is 24/7. So we know, again, if a hail event were to come through and an entire section were to go out, we would know about it immediately. The actual on-site monitoring is more standard work hours.
And again, similar to your transformer substations, everything else, right? There's not cameras at all the substations in the county and everything else. I mean, again, if something occurs, then, that's when things get triggered. That's also all part of the ERP and the discussions with the fire chief, the police department, the EMS services. All of that gets kind of built in and goes from there.
Commission members, any other questions?
Yeah, you said there's no problem with glass shards, but in your talk, you talked about a meltdown. What happens with the meltdown and the cleanup?
So there's only one project that I could think of where there was a sustained grass fire underneath some of the panels for a duration of time, where essentially the panels just kind of, again, if you were to take a lighter to your cell phone and just sit there with it on and, or a blowtorch, where they kind of melts, right? So what occurs there, again, is the panels are removed. Like after the fire incident's done, the panels are removed, they're discarded, everything else. We're not talking about melting and dripping. What I'm saying is it kind of would, think about a piece of plastic or glass, if you're kind of melting it, it's just going to warp it and the like. If in the unlikely event that was to occur and you needed soil testing done just to demonstrate there was nothing wrong with the soil and that after it certainly could be done and remediation could occur, but we wouldn't suspect there would be an issue like that. But certainly it is, again, always, Department of Environment always has the ability to require that, and or the city can ask the company to demonstrate it after an event.
And I can add, the state of Illinois does not require or mandate any inspections of projects. Okay. So that would be left to the city's discretion how they want to handle any type of annual inspections.
Any other questions? Obviously, if we do come up with something, we will email and be in communication. That then furthers our meeting, and we need a motion to continue the public hearing. Let me get my date here correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair and
Yes,
Commissioners
thank
and
you.
members of the public.
Thank you very much. We're going to make a motion to continue the public hearing to July 20th from 6 to 9. Then after we make that motion and continue the public hearing, we will move to public comment, which will then allow 30 minutes for that.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Rauter,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Carter to continue the meeting, public hearing to Monday, July 20th from 6 to 9. Roll call vote.
Rauter,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Brummel,
Yes.
Platt,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Riddle,
Yes.
Roderick.
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll be continuing the public hearing on Monday, July 20th, 6 to 9, same location. So with that being said, we now can move on to the public comment portion of our night. Let me get my notes out of the way here. I apologize, we did not take a recess tonight, so bear with me. And I do have something to read before we start the public comment portion. Persons wishing to speak tonight may do so after being recognized for that purpose by the chairperson. Only one person may address the Plan Commission at a time. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person and no longer to 30 minutes in total. We will be using a running clock located here to my right so that speakers can see how much time they have remaining to speak. I will be asking you at the end of 3 minutes to please wrap up your last sentence and finish. Any person's unused time may not be traded, utilized, or added to another person's comment time. In other words, you can't yield time to another speaker. The Plano Commission at any time, without creating precedent, can expand the numbers of those permitted to speak at any given meeting. Our goal here is to let everybody feel like they have an opportunity to speak, and we're willing to make that amendment if we so do so, but we would like to keep it in a timely manner so that we are not here till midnight. Persons addressing the Plan Commission shall identify themselves for the record and for the Plan Commission and members of the public also attending the meeting tonight. Persons addressing the Plan Commission will offer all comments in a courteous and professional manner, and please refrain from using inappropriate or offensive or profane language. The Plan Commission will not respond or engage in debate or discussion relating to the public comments offered. The public comment period is intended to afford members of the public with the opportunity to speak and express their views to the respective Plan Commission. The Plan Commission will take all comments made by its speakers under advisement, meaning that as you make your public comment, you may say whatever you want in the 3 minutes without profane language, but please know that your questions may not be answered as it is only public comment. We will take it into consideration, but you might not get a response or an answer from the petition or any of our commission members, but it is an opportunity for you to speak your mind, and we do take that into consideration every time that you guys speak. So, if you have signed up to speak tonight and did not get a chance to talk, then we will keep your name on the list in the order that it was written, and you will have the opportunity to speak at the next meeting if you so wish to do so, which would be July 20th. In the event that you are on the list and cannot attend the next meeting, then you will need to re-sign up to speak at the next meeting that you can attend. With that being said, we can start the public comment portion of the evening.
The initial public sign-up is George Rapidus.
My name is George Rapidis, R-A-P-I-D-I-S. I'm an attorney with the Chicago Laborers District Council Labor Management Cooperation Committee. It's a mouthful. So I wanted to discuss briefly some research conducted by the Climate Jobs Institute at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. The study was entitled Clean Energy Lost Wages, and it had some relevant findings, I believe, to this committee. It first found that 60% of community solar work at the moment is being done by out-of-state contractors, and that over 80% of solar workers on those projects are from out of state. However, projects built under a union project labor agreement are 94% local or residents. Multiple studies in various other states have also looked into the economic effect of that local labor, and they found up to a 2 times multiplier on those jobs. So as the money circulates through the economy more when you use local labor. And project labor agreements from labor unions, such as the Tri-Trade Agreement, which is myself, us, the operating engineers, and the electricians, would provide a more solid local labor force to orders of magnitude. I also wanted to briefly mention that having a PLA can help local youth start a career in the trades and progress in their lives in a way that doesn't involve having to get a college degree and go into debt for that. And it ensures that quality labor is used on these projects, because all of our apprenticeship programs have pathways specific to solar building. My final comment is that I encourage you to approve this project by Savion and to question future developers on if and how they're using local labor, because it's very relevant to Plano. Thank you.
Next is Lydia Simrall.
Hi, Lydia Simray, S-I-M-R-A-Y-H. Good evening, members of the commission. Again, my name is Lydia Simray, and I am a construction analyst with the Indiana-Illinois-Iowa Foundation for Fair Contracting. We're a labor management cooperation committee dedicated to promoting fair competition, responsible contracting, and high-quality construction throughout Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. I'm here this evening in support of the Plano Skies solar project. As Illinois continues to diversify its energy portfolio, utility-scale renewable energy projects like this one represent an important opportunity, not only to strengthen our electrical infrastructure, but to create thousands of hours of family-supporting construction work performed by highly trained, highly skilled craftspeople. From our perspective, projects of this scale are most successful when they are built by responsible contractors who invest in registered apprenticeship programs, comply with prevailing wage requirements, and provide safe working conditions for every individual on the job site. Those standards benefit workers, taxpayers, project owners, and the surrounding community alike. Illinois has become a national leader in demonstrating that renewable energy development and strong labor standards can go hand in hand. The construction industry has developed proven labor management frameworks that provide certainty for developers while ensuring that projects are completed efficiently, safely, and without unnecessary labor disputes. Those agreements have helped establish clear craft jurisdictions, promote workforce stability, and ensure that the benefits of these projects remain here in Illinois. The economic impact of utility-scale solar construction is significant. Research prepared for Climate Jobs Illinois estimates that every 1 gigawatt of utility-scale solar installed supports approximately 7,600 jobs, including roughly 2,800 direct construction jobs, while generating approximately $2.3 billion in economic output. While the Plano Skies project is only one development, it represents precisely the type of investment that supports local contractors, local suppliers, local restaurants, hotels, equipment dealers, and countless other businesses that benefit when construction workers are employed. Beyond the direct economic benefits, projects like this help demonstrate that Illinois can continue attracting private investment while maintaining the labor standards that have defined our construction industry for generations. Responsible development should never require sacrificing quality workmanship, worker protections, or fair competition. The IIFFC believes these goals are compatible. We can support economic development, strengthen our energy infrastructure, and create good-paying construction careers, all while ensuring projects are built safely, professionally, and in compliance with Illinois law. For those reasons, we respectfully urge the Commission to approve the Plano Skies Solar Project. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Nancy Gorman Bagley.
All right, I'm not a public speaker, Nancy Gorman Bagley, so bear with me, I'm a little nervous. For me to stand here and to talk to you guys it's important to me, and I can't ignore this any longer. I'm a lifelong resident of Plano, basically 71 years. I'm also representing my husband, Raymond Bagley, a resident for 53 years, and who is a retired UAW Local 145 member for 30 years, in addition to being a member of the Mechanics IAM Local 701. We support all the unions. Anytime we drive by the inflatable rat, we always honk our horn and support and have solidarity. I guess I'm not sure why the union members are here at these meetings. After the installation is complete, you'll be going to your next job site. It will not have to live with the ugliness of the solar farm. I wonder if anyone on this panel or the union members that are here would want to live across or near a solar field. They're just awful. I am baffled why you think that living next to a solar farm might boost or help surrounding people's property values. We consider ourselves lucky. We won't have to look out our windows every day and see the acres of solar panels, the unkept landscape, the waste of land, the possible habitat disruption, and any possible land erosion that may occur. But we will have to drive by it when going out of town and have to look at this big eyesore. We have traveled all over Illinois and have encountered many solar farms along the way. The majority of these solar fields are not being properly maintained, and in some cases, the weeds are up to the panels. As for the shrubbery that surrounds them, some of them are dead, and they're not being removed or replaced. Out of curiosity, after the union members leave for their next job, who's going to be maintaining these solar panel fields? Will it be union members or citizens of Plano? In response to the young lady in a previous meeting, Plano was established at 1854 and has been around for a long time. And while we may not have a lot going on here versus the other cities, we are slowly getting new businesses and restaurants, and we hope to see more. But I don't think there is a problem with Plano becoming a ghost town or businesses leaving if we don't get the solar panels. Having solar panel farm would only hurt the city of Plano, in my opinion. I want to thank Little Rock Township, Nikki Diaz, and anybody else that has been fighting this good fight of not having this come to our city. I love Plano. I'm still here. And I want to thank you all. Thank you. And as for the mayor and the aldermen of Plano, the ones the residents elected, quit trying to backdoor this project. Don't you decide what you think is best for Plano. Ask the Plano citizens what they want for the city of Plano. Have a vote. Let the citizens decide if they want a solar farm in the city of Plano. And then if they vote yes, then that's it. So be it. Let us decide what is best for the city. Oh, and by the way, you can't fix ugly. Ugly is ugly.
Next is Ed Culture.
Hi, Ed Culture, Kulchar. For 19 years, I've had the great honor of representing tens of thousands of hardworking union laborers throughout Chicagoland. And over that career, I've spoke at many meetings like this one. So I could talk about the benefits of increased tax revenue, or the local economic benefits of people making good union wages and spending money here, or other benefits to which there are many. But recent events in my life over the last couple of weeks gave me another perspective, and that's what I would like to talk about tonight. I recently decided to manage a baseball team of 10-year-olds. This is a hardworking group of good kids that made an all-star team and almost missed out on an awesome experience because they didn't have anyone to coach them. It didn't sit right with me, so with no kid of my own on the team, I volunteered. So the last couple weeks got me thinking about our obligations to future generations. Our goal, of course, should be to leave a better situation than what we inherited. Now, unfortunately, it's hard not to be a little resentful when I think about this. Just over 80 years ago, we had the greatest generation that won a world war, built a middle class where you can raise a family on one income. Not to mention civil rights legislation, putting a man on the moon. To an economy now where we face that's by and large built on mounting personal debt, people having to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, a middle class that's always under attack, and a deteriorating environment. So when projects like this come up, I find it hard to pass. Projects like this grow the middle class, not only by providing good union jobs on the site, but throughout the area. Because for the hundreds of people that'll be on this site, that means there's hundreds of opportunities down the street, and so on, and that's how you grow a middle class. So if we want middle class jobs and a better environment, these are the types of projects we should support. On top of which, it provides benefits to the environment and other local benefits like the increased tax revenue. So I'll close with this. If we feel any obligation to our kids or grandkids' generation, the question to me shouldn't be, should we go forward with this project? The question should be, how could we not? Thank you.
Next is Paul Fosco.
Good evening, members of this commission. My name is Paul Fosco, and I am a laborer here in Kendall County, in the Kendall County area. I stand in support of the Plano Skies solar project because it's an investment that will benefit local workers, local businesses, and our community for decades to come. This project represents the opportunity for families like mine to have an extended period of time of work right here in our backyard. During construction, this project will create more than 250 local jobs with a commitment to use local union labor through the tri-trade agreement with the laborers, operating engineers, and electricians. That means good paying jobs for skilled and trained local construction workers. If this project gets approved, workers will support local restaurants, hotels, gas stations, and other small businesses. Also, this project is expected to generate more than $18 million in direct local spending during construction. The long-term benefits are just as important. The project is projected to generate approximately $52 million in new property tax revenue, including more than $35 million for Plano School District and $4.5 million to the city of Plano. Those revenues help fund schools, public safety, roads, and other essential services without increasing the tax burden of local residents. The Plano Skies Solar Project is an opportunity to put men and women to work within their own communities. strengthen our local economy, and invest in our local schools. So please vote yes for the Plano Skies Solar Project. Thank you.
Next up is Herb Walton. Robert Hattier.
How you doing? Robert Hattier, Hattier. I am the Director of Renewable Energy for IBEW Local 134 and the Executive Director of the Illinois IBEW Renewable Energy Fund. Before I get into that and what I would like to say today, this is my first meeting for this project. I was not able to attend the last two due to other conflicts. But I have to say, I've been in the solar industry for 25 years. When I got into this industry, we did not see as many projects as we see today. People were choosing solar for the environmental benefits, potentially the energy independence. It was not necessarily the economic viability. That tends to be the focus now. In hearings like this that I've been in over the last 25 years, a lot of the developers on the stage that were presenting material, when commissioners would ask questions, there was a lot of, I don't have an answer, I'll get back to you. I did not hear that today. I was very impressed with the presentation that came from Savion, but I also want to say I was equally impressed with the questions that the commissioners were asking and that the public was asking. People are asking the right questions. We're talking about bringing large developments into areas. We don't want to force anyone's hands. I felt like the way this meeting went really impressed me, and I hope they all go like this going forward. But the reason why I'm here today is I represent the Illinois IBEW Renewable Energy Fund, which is a statewide grant-funded workforce development organization. So we operate a program called the Craft Apprenticeship. I work in partnership with 18 IBEW local unions, including Local 461 that covers this area, but also area high schools, community colleges, and community-based organizations. Our goal is to extend electrical apprenticeship opportunities to historically underserved populations, to displaced workers, whether that be manufacturing, energy workers, agricultural workers, but all across the board, people from all backgrounds. And projects like this is what helps the IBEW and the laborers and the operating engineers that you heard today extend our apprenticeship opportunities to more and more people, creating those local jobs. This school right here that we're in, students going to this school next year could have an opportunity in one of the 3 trades that are represented here due to the projects like this coming into our communities. So I also stand here in support of this project, especially considering the use of the tri-trade agreement. And again, I thank all of you for comments and questions and testimony. I was very impressed. Thank you.
Next is Karen Henry.
Good evening. My name is Karen Henry. Plano has been recognized for 160 years as the home of the Reapers, the birthplace of the first Reaper harvesting machine factory, opening in 1861. Because of this, our high school has adopted the Reaper as its mascot. Will we be recognized as the home of the solar farm? Will our school mascot be a solar panel? The USDA stands with American agriculture, not Green New Deal mandates that sacrifice our farmland. Farm security is national security. Climate extremists are holding our state, our species, and our nature hostage. The idea that this land can be farmed during or after the solar complex is installed or decommissioned is a lie that solar companies are telling aging landowners in an effort to get them to lease over their land. Decommissioning will come much sooner than 35 years, as the technology will be obsolete in 2 to 4 years, and the city will have to fit the bill. This project will negatively impact our property, our health, and our way of life. But if you don't care, all Sabian has to do is write a check, and they are allowed to destroy our prime farmland that can never be replaced. And you fail to protect the health and environment of the citizens of Little Rock Township, that includes this city of Plano. You must obey the Constitution as it is conveyed in the Little Rock Township Ordinance 202-50626, that the county is still under township form of government. Keep in mind, Public Act 104-0458, effective June 1st, 2026, is unconstitutional. An unconstitutional act is not law. It conveys no right, it imposes no duties, affords no protection, it creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. That's a Supreme Court ruling, Norton versus Shelby County, 118 U.S. 425. Don't violate prime farmland protections to ram this huge, unreliable solar energy project through. Say no to rezoning, annexation, special use permits, variance, and say no to the Sabian solar project. Thank you.
Next up is Eric Light. Next up is Dottie, last name starts with a P. Apologize, I can't read the last name.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Dottie Pigney, P-I-G-N-E-Y, and I live in the unincorporated area of Little Rock Township. As an independent resident whose home and daily life are directly tied to this area, I am here tonight to urge this board to vote no on the Plano Skies solar project. Every one of us in this room knows the words, "To America the Beautiful." We sing proudly about our amber waves of grain as a symbol of American heritage, abundance, and the natural beauty of our land that sustains us. But if this massive industrial project is approved, we will be making a choice to replace those historic amber waves of grain with amber waves of glass. Go to Bloomington and look at the solar farms and the solar windmills. What a horrible sight. We are talking about taking productive, rich agricultural soil out of service and blanket covering it with thousands of industrial solar panels. I understand the push for new energy infrastructure, but there is a right place and a wrong place for everything. An independent agricultural community is the wrong place. When projects like Plano Skies move in, they permanently alter the landscape. They turn quiet rural horizons into heavy industrial zones. They impact the open character of our neighborhoods, create long-term questions for our local environment, and visually erase the heritage that brought many of us to this area in the first place. Once you cover prime farmland with steel, gravel, and glass, you can't just flip a switch and get it back. The independent space we enjoy out here is finite, and once it is commercialized, it is gone for good. Our community doesn't need to be annexed or overtaken by industrial utility footprints. We need to preserve what makes this area unique. Your job on this board is to protect the interests, the character, and the future of the people who actually live here and tend to this land. Please, let's stand up for the true spirit of our landscape. Let's protect the fields that define us rather than covering them up with an industrial sea of glass. I urge you to preserve our soil, We feed the world. Farmers feed the world. Respect our unincorporated community and vote against the Plano Skies project. Thank you for your time and your service.
Next up is Nicole Diaz.
Thank you, Marty. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Diaz. I live on Glenda Lane in Little Rock Township. First of all, I want to tell the Planning Commission that thank you for your due diligence with the ordinance that you had made to enforce and make sure that you remember what you had done with all the hours and the negotiation of that ordinance that you had put in play for solar fields. Please keep that all in mind while you're deciding all this. Burns are burns. I heard a quote at one time that this company has deep pockets. Dig into them. Put the dirt in. We don't want to see the shit. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cuss. I really didn't mean to cuss. It could have been worse, but okay. Anyway, for people who know me, but dig in your pockets. They're deep, okay? Do it, because we don't want to see it, period. And to the guy who, about the sound, I live a mile away from the high school. I can hear the football games. I can hear the bands. I can hear my neighbor who's having a party in his barn, and some of the people in my subdivision can't hear it, but I can hear it because of the way that the waves of the sounds go. It's something you did not talk about, and this is fact. I can hear a dog barking in a barn acres and acres away. So, you know what? I think I'll hear a humming noise, especially when the data center had done the testing for Yorkville. I could hear the humming sound of the testing last summer. They echo, period. It echoes, especially out in our country land. Also, you talked about keeping the vegetation. Known fact that you've already torn down 16 to 20 beautiful pine trees on that land off of Rock Creek Road, probably to bulldoze and level the land. And I'm waiting for all those visual things that you're talking about coming back to the meetings and bringing all this stuff. I want to see it because you never follow through with anything that you talk about to do, and that's a big issue for me. Then, I'm doing so much better than last time. Okay, the smoke from the melting. The melting, there's still smoke. What happens to that environmentally? If there was a fire with the batteries or the panels. Now, I do know rats from the union could eat the wires, so you might want to be careful of that and make sure you make sure it's not invisible ink for the contract of the unions. So, because they could bring the rat and it eat up the wires. And that could cause the fire that, I know, I'm rattling, and I'm sorry.
If you want to finish your sentence.
Yes, no, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm over it, but, okay, thank you.
Next up is Darlene Hollenbach.
Hello, my name is Darlene Hollenbach, and I live on Glenda. And I want to speak for the families that have already invested in Plano. They have they invested in their own homes. They want to give their families the country life. A lot of families, well, Some of these residents, they do drive to the city for their job. A lot of families have to drive to work, but they chose to live here in the fields of corn and beans. We want a country life, not panels and fences. We'll have to worry about our property values. We'll have to worry about the safety of our drinking water. I have lived and paid taxes in Plano for over 35 years. I cannot believe Plano would sell out like this. My children were born and grew up here in Plano. 35 years is like a lifetime for me. That's how long we'll have these panels in the fields. Some of us will not be around at the finale of this project. You will be burdening the future generations of today to clean up your mess. We are seeing a record number of tornadoes in Illinois, more than in any other year on record. Why does our good, productive farmland have to bear the burden of this latest novelty? I think these jobs here that everybody's talking about will be here for what, a year? Maybe 2. And it's a local labor force, so I think they already buy locally. I don't see any benefit to our businesses. Thank you.
Next up is Mike Bond. Ray Bagley. Chris Wykes. Last is John Wykes. That completes the sign-up list for public comment.
In further meetings, we want to conduct in the same manner and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. So if you chose not to speak tonight, please attend the next meeting with questions and public comment. The next meeting, again, will be July 20th from 6 to 9. Members' comments? Anything before we motion to close? Anything? None? Then we will move to an adjournment for tonight's meeting, with our next meeting being July 20th, same location, 6 to 9. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Carter,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Riddle. Roll call vote.
Carter,
Yes.
Riddle,
Yes.
Brummel,
Yes.
Klatt,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Router,
Yes.
Roderick.
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll see you all Monday, July 20th, same location, 6 to 9. Thank you for coming and speaking tonight.